yelled medic, and I looked, and there was no way a medic could have got to that person in time. So I left my seat, took my tie off, I jumped over the barrier, and I ran to the individual. But when I got there, it was too late. The person was bleeding out through their head. And like I said, once again, respects to the family because this is a very tough time. But they were shot, and I tried to, block the wound. I tried to I held a towel against it, and until a medical team arrived and got him out. And, from there, I helped the police and crowd control with getting people out of there because people were very nervous. People were very hesitant, and we had to move people fast and get them into a safe location opposite of where the shooter was at or said to be at. So I assisted with getting people down and getting people out. And I try to keep kids calm and just get people clear.
Wow, Rico. Obviously, we want to be sensitive to the victim's family.
Yes.
But can you tell us more about this person, where they were? Was it a man? Was it a woman?
Well, it was a male. It was a male victim. He was literally just sitting there in the stands. He had to be maybe 3 or 4 rows up from the bottom of the bleachers where everybody was sitting. And 1 second, where everyone's cheering and happy and listening to what Trump's saying, and the next minute, he's gone.
Rico, did you have any training in this sort of like first aid? I mean, this is life-saving aid that you're describing here.
I mean, I'm in the military. I'm in the 171st Air Refueling Wing, and we learn first aid and self-aid buddy care and basic training. And at the point, as soon as I heard the shots and I seen and heard someone yell medic, my first instinct was, I'm trained in self-aid. I'm trained in applying a tourniquet, but I'm not trained to see someone's, what I witnessed.
I mean, nobody can be trained for that. And we're getting the sense, Rico, not just from you, but from others, I think there's going to be some serious time, some healing that's going to need to take place for the people who were there and saw all of this, and especially for you to see everything up close. And you got the sense early on that that this person was lost?
From understanding head wounds and how they operate, when I seen what I seen, I was afraid that person was lost. And reading what has been done, said and stated in the news so far, those are now facts, which is a shame.
Rico, I don't even know if these are the right words to ask this question because most people have never been in this situation, but how are you processing what you saw and what you witnessed?
I mean, one can only process what happened, hopefully as slow as possible. But my worry, my heart at this point in time is not for myself, but it's for the families of the loved one.
Rico Elmore.
It's important.
Thank you again for your time, and I'm sure the family is grateful, at least at your efforts. That you jumped in and you did everything you could to help out. And of course, our hearts go out to all the victims and you as well. And we're thankful that you're okay and able to share your story. Thank you very much tonight.
Thank you.
Again, that's one of the many witness accounts that we've received from Rico Elmore there. Really horrific in how this played out. these terrifying and chaotic moments that people described for us. And it went from jubilant people in the crowd, eager to hear from the former president, to within a matter of seconds, the pop, pop, pop that people thought at first maybe sounded like fireworks before the horror of what actually happened came into focus. Let's go back to Martha Raddatz. Martha, I know you've been talking to sources here, and I got to say, just it's one thing when we get the reports from law enforcement, but when you hear from a witness who witnessed someone die before their very eyes, it's a reminder of just how horrific and historic this event was today.
And how tragic.
Yeah.
And I think most of us just saw what happened to former President Trump, and we're all thankful he is okay. But what happened in that venue, and hearing the story of that young soldier or military person leaping into action, which is not a surprise, going there for a jubilant celebration and having to deal with that kind of tragedy is sobering to us all. I do know that the weapon that the shooter apparently used was something that could be fired from 200, 300 yards away or even more, and could have been accurate. He very well could have shot more people. He very well could have killed former President Trump, even though he was 200 or 300 yards away, because that kind of weapon has that kind of range. We don't know yet whether he had a scope on that weapon or any sort of scope whatsoever. But even so, even just with the naked eye, he was clearly shooting within range of President Trump.
Yeah, still so many questions about how this played out, who this shooter was, the motivation there, and where the investigation goes from here. Martha Raddatz, as always, thank you. Let's go to Josh Margolin, one of our senior investigative producers, who's been getting new details from law enforcement. Josh, what are you learning?
With the key part of the investigation, a key part of the investigation will be on looking at where the shooter was, this elevated position, as the Secret Service now confirms. Elevated positions have long been perceived by law enforcement as a real risk to events, to people that gather. Look, just in recent years, we saw the Highland Park, Illinois mass shooting on July 4th, 2022. That was a shooter who was at an elevated position. Of course, the Las Vegas massacre, the worst mass shooting in American history, that was with a shooter who fired down from an elevated position on the Las Vegas Strip. And obviously, we can't forget President Kennedy was killed by a gunman who was located floors above the motorcade that Kennedy was in when he was assassinated. Elevated positions the Secret Service prepares for this. So a key thing is going to be, how did this gunman get to the location? Why was that location available to that person?
Exactly. And I think obviously this is early on, and it's hard to ask some of these hypothetical questions now. But Josh, like all the surveillance and the scanning of these areas that go into place before the event even occurs, and the drones and the helicopters and devices up above, it's hard to imagine how something like this could have been missed from 200, 300 yards away, a rooftop elevated position. That will definitely be part of the investigation going forward.
Absolutely. And in fact, the Secret Service has already gone public during the January 6th committee hearings. There was testimony about the Secret Service. They know that people that come to Trump rallies sometimes come carrying weapons, not necessarily because they want to hurt anybody. People carry weapons, but you're not allowed to bring those weapons into proximity of the president, of the former president, of the candidate.
Josh Margolin, thank you so much. We appreciate it. Let's go back to Rick Klein, our political director at Washington bureau chief, who's there in Milwaukee. I just want to get more on your response, because it is hard to imagine how this week of the Republican National Convention is going to play out, business as usual or as planned. What are you learning about some of the adjustments or changes that could be made in the coming hours?
Whit, I was told just moments ago that there were no changes to the convention itself, but I would note that there is precedent for condensing a convention in the event that you need to. There have been times where major storms, either in a convention city or elsewhere in the country, have forced the cancellation of one night. There is plenty of wiggle room in a schedule like this to be able to do the convention business in fewer than the 4 nights that are now scheduled. But I am told that things are still on track as of this hour, although things are changing fast. But Whit, I would mention, just to understand what a convention is like, it's not just what goes on inside the arena itself. That's the main convention business. We're talking about dozens, maybe hundreds of other events throughout the weekend. John Carl's been reporting about things that are canceled tonight. Well, tomorrow night, there's a 15,000 person open air welcoming party for all delegates and invited guests. That is an enormous event, and it's an enormously hard event to secure. Similarly, you've got talking about breakfasts that happen around the city in hotel ballrooms and private residences. So many opportunities to worry about the security footprint that involve elected officials, maybe even the president himself or the former president or his vice presidential running mate might be slated to attend things like this. So you have to think about not just the event itself, which is still on, but everything surrounding it. This was a city that was ready to celebrate this moment. It is now a city that is worried, concerned about this increased threat environment.
Rick Klein, thank you. Let's go back to John Carl, also there in Milwaukee. And John, picking up on that point, because this is not just known threats with security, right? It's anybody who could be motivated. We've talked about lone wolves and that threat in the past. It's somebody who may see an event that they saw and then be inspired to do something that can be almost impossible to plan for, especially when you have large gatherings of lots of people.
Yeah, and look, this was already a place that was going to be in lockdown for the next week. I mean, I am here just outside the Convention Center Hall, and you can see, I mean, you can't see, but I can see right over here the fencing that has been put up to basically secure this place, several block radius, basically already on lockdown, even though the convention itself doesn't start until Monday at 2 o'clock Eastern time. But they were preparing to keep this, and I've been covering political conventions for a long time. Heightened security is not new, but there does feel to be something different already before this terrible event in Pennsylvania. A heightened sense of concern, again, given the threat environment, given the fact that death threats have become just a matter of course across in our politics. Political figures, public servants, journalists facing this kind of stuff. So there's, I can only imagine what the next few days are going to look like here. Yeah,
the next 24 to 48 hours, there could be some big changes, even though for now they appear to be staying the course with the plans. John Carl, yes. Thank you. Let's go to our Chief Justice Correspondent, Pierre Thomas. Pierre, you've been reporting on these threats for months now. Law enforcement, they've been aware, they've been worried about it. This obviously a worst case scenario as they are now investigating what appears to be a possible assassination attempt of a former president.
Indeed, we have a new statement from the Attorney General. He expresses his concern for former President Trump. He says his heart goes out to the victim, the spectator who died. He also issues a statement saying, quote, "We will not tolerate violence of any kind. Violence like this is an attack on our democracy. The Justice Department will bring every available resource to this investigation." And we have some more clarity now about exactly how this is going to unfold. The Justice Department's National Security Division, along with the FBI, will oversee this investigation with support from the U.S. Attorney's Office in Pittsburgh. So what that means is that this is officially being looked at as an assassination plot. Potentially that is going to be investigated until they can, as another source said, determine otherwise. That tells you the level of concern. Also, I'm being told by sources that law enforcement will be looking at security for all major public events, particularly those involving politicians, in the coming days. As you said, Whit, the elevated threat environment has been of great concern by the FBI director, and sources within the Attorney General's office have been telling me repeatedly in recent weeks that the biggest concern he had going forward toward the fall was this spike in threats of political violence. And the fact that also terrorism, ISIS, all these different things were surging at precisely the same time. That is the environment that we face ourselves with. And the other thing that's very important, too, from a source I just spoke with, is that until they can get a definitive blueprint, understanding of who this suspect is, they are not releasing very much information because they cannot yet say that this is contained to only this event. They cannot yet say that.
Pierre Thomas, thank you. Let's go back to John Carl. I understand you have a new statement from the RNC.
Yeah, this is a joint statement from the Trump campaign and from the Republican National Committee, and we just got this in, so I'm going to be reading this to you for the first time here on the air. A statement from the Trump campaign and the RNC. As was communicated earlier this evening, President Trump is doing well and grateful to law enforcement and to first responders for their fast action. President Trump looks forward to joining you all in Milwaukee as we proceed with our convention to nominate him to serve as the 47th President of the United States. As our party's nominee, President Trump will continue to share his vision to make America great again. So the key line there is that President Trump looks forward to joining you here in Milwaukee to continue the plans for our convention. Nothing is changing here in terms of the convention going forward. In fact, an individual I spoke to who has been involved in the planning here said they were still working things out, but predicted that the convention wouldn't just continue, but it will continue with a vengeance. I expect not just all 4 days of this convention to take place, but it to be a very energized convention and very much focused on portraying Donald Trump as somebody who couldn't even be stopped by an attempted assassin.
All right, John Carl, let's go to someone who knows a lot about Republican conventions, and Reince Priebus, our political contributor, who's also a former head of the RNC and former chief of staff at one time under Trump. Reince is joining us on the phone right now. First, Reince, can you just give me your reaction? What are you hearing from Republicans across the board?
Well, obviously, like everybody, it's just horrific and dreadful, and it's a sad day. It's, innocent person was killed, and maybe others. We just don't know the extent of this stuff, but it's just a sad reminder of how violent some people can be, and seemingly our inability to stop it. So it's all of those emotions all at the same time. So, and we're also gathered right now with soon will be about 50,000 people in Milwaukee to celebrate our nominee and also celebrate our community in Milwaukee and in Wisconsin. And obviously it's tragic in a lot of ways. So I'm obviously grateful and I'm grateful that the guy was killed, but it's the whole thing's tragic. Lots of lost life and obviously just a lot of mixed emotions. Let me just put it that way.
Ryan, speaking of those mixed emotions, and we've heard a number of statements from politicians on all sides of the aisle, most condemning the violence and saying that this can never stand, it should not happen. But we are also hearing some who are pointing the finger and placing blame. What's your reaction to that? Is there a place for that kind of conversation right now in this moment?
I don't think so. I mean, I think you have to think and you have to contemplate. And in the case of blame, I guess you can investigate what happened and why it happened. And, I'm sure there's going to be a time for that. But I just don't feel comfortable getting into that right now. There's obviously sick people out there, and they don't care about life. They don't care about their own life. So you don't care about your own life. You don't care about other people's lives. You get tragic results, and it's more sad, I think, than anything. I think that's probably the overwhelming feeling of most people.
Reince Priebus, thank you for your time tonight. We do appreciate it. I want to go back to John Santucci, our executive editor on investigations. And John, you've been in close contact with the Trump family tonight. They gave you some of the first statements directly about Trump's condition, that he was receiving medical treatment, that he's doing okay, he's doing fine. And also he claims that he was shot, that it was a bullet that grazed the top of his ear. What more are they telling you tonight?
Yeah, well, Whit, first, a very rare public statement from Ivanka Trump. Of course, this was the only member of the Trump family that went to the White House with Donald Trump when he, of course, won and ascended to the presidency in 2017. Ivanka writing on Twitter with tonight, well, thank you for your love and prayers for my father and for the other victims of today's senseless violence in Butler, Pennsylvania. I'm grateful to the Secret Service and all the other law enforcement officers for their quick and decisive action today. I continue to pray for our country. I love you, Dad, today and always. That statement from Ivanka Trump posted to her Twitter account. And again, a very rare public statement from the former first daughter because, as we know, unlike her two brothers, being the three eldest children of the former president, they had still stayed very actively involved in Donald Trump's political life. Ivanka has really gone off into a private life with her husband, Jared Kushner. You mentioned with other members of the family I've spoken to, I did have a very brief exchange with Eric Trump. Of course, you'll recall from all of the trials that his father faced earlier this year, Eric Trump, a fixture by his father's side in that Manhattan courtroom when we were, of course, at the Manhattan DA's case earlier this year. Eric Trump telling me that his father is the toughest man I have ever met, not elaborating on his father's condition, but, nevertheless, right there in his father's corner, as he has been. Of course, let's not forget also his wife, Laura Trump, Whit, as you well know, is now the second in command of the Republican National Committee. It'll be her first convention as number 2 for the RNC when that gets kicked off in Milwaukee on Monday. And finally, Whit, as ABC News first reported and I first spoke to moments after this happened, Donald Trump Jr. Had told me via phone that his father has been in good spirits, that nothing is going to stop him. And of course, again, Donald Trump Jr., his brother's active by his father's side, but you have to recognize that Donald Trump Jr., of course, has really been the one to continue the political mantle of his father. And it's actually a rare occurrence that the two sons, one or the other, was not with the president tonight in Butler, Pennsylvania. We know they have been very active present, whether it be in the courtroom or on the campaign trail with.
John Santucci, thank you. Let's go back to our chief White House correspondent, Mary Bruce. Mary, we know that President Biden is in Rehoboth, Delaware for the weekend, but he has been following developments briefed by his staff and the Secret Service. And then he came out before the cameras earlier today condemning the violence, saying that there's no place in America for this kind of violence. What more do we know about his activities tonight? We know that he did reach out to former President Trump directly.
Yeah, he did. He is still trying to get in touch with the former president. We know that he reached out to him in a rare move, President Biden actually referring to his rival by his first name, saying he was trying to get a hold of Donald. The president coming out and forcefully condemning this kind of violence, saying it is sick, saying there's no place in America for this kind of violence, saying it's one of the reasons that this country has to come together, one of the reasons why we have to unite the country, saying we cannot be like this. He said, a Trump rally should be something that is allowed to be conducted peacefully without any kind of problems like this. And while the president did refer to this as political violence, he did not go so far to call it an assassination attempt. He was asked that directly. The president instead saying that he had an opinion, but that he didn't have any facts. We know he continues to be briefed and updated by this. He has been briefed by the Director of Homeland Security, the Secretary of Homeland Security, the Director of the Secret Service, his Homeland Security advisor. He remains for now at Rehoboth, Delaware. He was there at the beach house, at his beach house for the weekend. He actually was leaving Mass when he learned of this incident. He was fully briefed and then I'm told wanted to come out and speak to Americans as soon as he could. This, there is no question, completely upends and changes this race. The president is now and his campaign are trying to turn down the temperature. They're pulling down their political communications, pulling down their ads. It's not just, we've been talking about how this will or will not impact the Republican National Convention. This will also have a huge impact on the president's campaign as well. We'll be looking closely to see how how he may be changing any of his upcoming events as well. He's supposed to be out on the road in Texas and in Nevada early on next week. Will any of that change? One of many remaining questions. But the president and many of those close to him, we have seen a slew of his cabinet officials and advisors coming out and calling to sort of dial down rhetoric in this country. One of the big remaining questions is whether that will happen or whether this incident will further divide this country.
And that will be a big test, Mary, we've been talking about. I want to follow up on that because while the president and his campaign, at least publicly, are talking about dialing down the rhetoric, we have seen some politicians out there already placing blame that would appear to only turn up the heat across the country. How is the Biden campaign, how are others who you're talking to responding to that sort of rhetoric?
Yeah, look, you are already seeing those who are trying to politicize this. We have seen from some Republicans, including from J.D. Vance, who, of course, has been on the very short list as a possible VP pick for Donald Trump, coming out and suggesting that Joe Biden's rhetoric is partly to blame for this, noting that the president has been running a campaign very much centered on Biden's argument that Donald Trump is a danger to democracy. The president is trying, to use this as a moment to bring the country together. Of course, that sentiment is something that his campaign strongly disagrees with. But I think it is no surprise, given how divisive the rhetoric in this country is now, given how divided our nation is, that we are unfortunately seeing, just shortly after a horrific incident like this, that there are, efforts to politicize some of this. How this plays out, of course, remains to be seen.
This is such a pivotal moment in the campaign as we move towards the conventions and then the elections. It remains to be seen how the country will respond. Mary Bruce, thank you. I do want to bring in, we have some more eyewitnesses who were there at that event in Pennsylvania today. John Dohanish was there and he is joining us now on the phone. John, if you can hear me, just walk us through what you saw and heard.
Hey, yeah. So, well, first, I just wanted to send out my condolences and prayers to the families of the victims. It was just crazy to just watch that so fast. But I'm just going to jump right into it, right to when the shots happened. Trump started his speech, and immediately it sounded like what everyone's saying, like fireworks or firecrackers. And as soon as I heard the first one, I looked over. We were probably right in the middle of the stands. If you're facing Trump, we were in the left section underneath the screen, right in the front row. I just saw the bullets hitting the stands, bouncing up, and I thought they were like the shells at first. Like I thought someone was right beside us. And then I heard the pause. There was the 4 shots, maybe a 5-second pause, and then the rest of the 4 shots that I then heard. And then all of a sudden I'm hearing everyone just screaming, get down, get down. I'm hearing, get a medic. I'm seeing people with blood on them. I'm trying to help people get down. And I look up, I see the Secret Service gathering Trump immediately. Like I heard everyone saying, that was just highly impressive. But yeah, that was basically it from that. It just happened all so fast.
I'm sure, and John, again, as we've seen the video, it was really just a matter of seconds that all this was happening as the shots were fired, and you're there witnessing all of this in real time. Was there a moment when fear started to settle in, when you realized, oh, this is real, this is really happening, these are gunshots, and now I'm worried about my own safety and the safety of others?
So I wouldn't say fear, but definitely more concern for others, because I was around a lot of more older people, so I was more worried about trying to get them down before I can get myself, because I knew I have my faith in God, so I knew I was going to be okay, but I just wanted to help other people get down, and I had someone's, person with me. I was covering them. They were crying. I was trying to calm them down, help them keep calm. I told them just to keep praying, keep calm. I just kept telling everything was going to be okay, but unfortunately for those 2 victims, or if there was more, I'm not sure, but yeah, tried my best.
Were you close to some of the victims?
Probably about 5 to 7 feet away from the one gentleman in the stands there who, I guess it was someone's father there.
And how quickly after seeing that victim did you realize that person was in grave danger? Was it immediate?
It was immediate. Like I seen, whenever I heard he got hit in the head, from what I heard, I seen someone else give the signal that he didn't make it, and that just infuriated me. That just enraged me, and I just have a feeling that we're gonna come back and come out stronger than ever. I feel now.
And when you say that, and of course, there's such a mix of emotions, right? And you were there, and you're still processing everything. But when you say we're going to come out of this stronger, what do you mean by that? You mean the country? You mean uniting?
Yep.
Yeah.
As a one, I feel like people are going to hopefully eventually start joining together and come out as one against the evil coming into the world or into our country, however you want to look at it like that. Stand up, I guess you could say.
John Dohanish, we appreciate your time tonight, and we're thankful that you are okay and the people around you, and we're just so sorry, and our hearts ache for you and others who had to witness this horror, and of course the families of those who were killed and injured. John, thank you for your time.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Once again, for those of you who are just tuning in, we're coming to 10 p.m. Eastern time here, the top of the hour. We've been on this story for hours. I'm Whit Johnson in New York. We are following the major developments tonight after the shooting at a campaign rally for former President Donald Trump. This happened in Butler, Pennsylvania. On the right side of your screen right there, you're seeing the events play out in real time. It was a matter of seconds. The president described the incident on Truth Social a short time ago, saying that he was shot with a bullet that pierced the upper part of his right ear. And you can actually see in the video moments before he reached for his ear before he went down to the ground. He was then taken to a nearby hospital and is reported to be fine. The incident is being investigated now as a possible assassination attempt. Authorities say the shots were fired from a rooftop outside the venue from some 200 to 300 yards away. 8 rounds were fired from an AR-style rifle. The shooter was then neutralized, killed by the Secret Service. A second person, a bystander, is also dead, and we're told that 2 others were injured, and we're still awaiting more details on their conditions. Earlier this evening, President Biden came before the cameras condemning the violence, saying all federal agencies are engaged in this investigation. The FBI is taking the lead. They will, of course, focus on the shooter and the motivation, but also on the security measures surrounding the event. This horrific moment, loud popping noises, that's what we could hear in the video. That's what we've been hearing from witnesses. The former president, in the photographs you will see, appeared to grab his right ear. Secret Service agents then rushing the stage, protecting him with their bodies, crowding around the former president. Those anxious moments waiting to see if Trump was okay. And you can see that trickle of blood coming down in some of the images. Secret Service then helping Trump up with what appeared to be that blood around his ear, Trump pumping his fists, signaling to the crowd that he was okay. And we did hear some roars and cheers from the crowd when they saw that. Agents helping Trump to a vehicle. And once again, as he gets in there, acknowledging the crowd that was cheering him as he left. And then they take him off to the hospital. Of course, hundreds of supporters were there witnessing all of this, left shaken and in shock. The incident comes just 2 days before the Republican National Convention is set to start. Late this evening, the campaign and the RNC issuing a joint statement saying former President Trump looks forward to joining the convention. Apparently, it will go on as scheduled. And right now, here's ABC's Rachel Scott, who was at the rally in Butler when the incident occurred.
This is the shocking moment. Chaos erupted at Donald Trump's rally in Butler, Pennsylvania.
If you want to really see something that's said, take a look at what happened.
You can hear several pops and see the former president grabbing his ear, ducking for cover behind the podium. Secret Service agents rushing the stage, surrounding Trump, shielding him, taking him down to the ground. The screaming crowd looking on in horror. A short time later, agents carefully lifting the former president up.
I got you, sir. I got you, sir.
Let me get my shoes on.
Hold that in your head. It's bloody.
Blood clearly seen on his face, Trump pumping his fist. Agents whisking the former president off the stage, down the stairs to a waiting armored SUV, rushing him to a local medical center.
We heard what we appeared to be gunfire coming. The former president was rushed off the stage. Right now, with Secret Service, he's being escorted into his vehicle. This was a chaotic moment that just played out right here in Pennsylvania. People running and rushing to the ground as they heard those apparent shots fired.
Then pandemonium, thousands of people running for cover.
Unbelievable.
Tonight, the Trump campaign releasing a statement saying the former president is fine and being checked out at a local medical facility. Donald Trump Jr. telling ABC News he spoke to his father, who remains in the hospital, and described Trump as in good spirits, saying he remains under observations.
Just hours ago, this area was lined with Trump supporters. They entered that tent right there to be screened by Secret Service, going through metal detectors, their belongings detected. Now, this is the space where you have Trump supporters that are leaving, panicked and confused, as Secret Service agents rush us out of this area and back to our cars.
Tonight, the crowd still in disbelief.
Tell me what you saw and what you heard. You said that you heard the popping sounds and you got down?
Sounds. At first you think like maybe firecrackers, but it continued. It continued, and then somebody yelled, "Get down." We got down, and we huddled, and we started praying.
Tonight, local officials telling ABC News those sounds were in fact gunshots. Live rounds fired from a rooftop adjacent to the venue outside the security perimeter. This is being investigated as an attempted assassination. And tonight, the local district attorney telling ABC News at least one person is dead and the shooter is dead as well. Tonight, President Biden addressing the nation.
I have tried to get a hold of Donald. He's with his doctors. Apparently he's doing well. I plan on talking to him shortly, I hope, when I get back to the telephone. Look, there's no place in America for this kind of violence. It's sick. It's sick. It's one of the reasons why we have to unite this country. We cannot allow for this to be happening. We cannot be like this. We cannot condone this. But the idea that there's political violence or violence in America like this is just unheard of. It's just not appropriate. And everybody must condemn it.
And moments ago, former President Donald Trump posting on Truth Social, thanking the Secret Service, saying, "I want to extend my condolences to the family of the person at the rally who was killed, and also to the family of another person who was badly injured. It is incredible that such an act could take place in our country. I was shot with a bullet that pierced the upper part of my right ear. I knew immediately that something was wrong and that I heard a whizzing sound, shots, and immediately felt the bullet ripping through the skin. Much bleeding took place, so I realized then what was happening. God bless America."
And back out here outside of where this rally took place just hours ago, we are just the last remaining network crew, and no one else is allowed in at this time. We know that behind me, where this rally took place, it's now an active crime scene. We have seen an increase in the amount of officials that have gone in. We've also seen people leave. We actually just spoke to one man who was a physician. He said that this was his very first Trump rally. He just spoke to the FBI about what he witnessed. He said he rushed to the aid of that bystander, of that attendee that ultimately was shot and later passed away due to his injuries. He said he was trying to do everything that he could to help. And I just want to move aside here to give you a sense of how this looks right now. Behind me where the lights are, that is where this Trump rally took place. And within minutes of the former president taking the stage, that's when we heard the gunshots erupt. And something that's very striking, I will tell you, being here tonight after witnessing the chaos and the panic that unfolded in those minutes, the terrifying moments for everyone that gathered here today, there is that image of the American flag, a strong reminder that even in these divided times, there is something that still unites us. Whit?
Absolutely. That's a great point. And Rachel, you've been there for hours in the stifling heat and witnessing all of this. You were inside when it happened. You were rushed out by law enforcement. And here you are once again. I do have a follow-up question for you, though. I know as you're sort of giving us the lay of the land here, we've been hearing from not only law enforcement about this other building that the shooter was apparently perched on top of. And we also heard from witnesses who said that they described seeing that location with canines and law enforcement scoping it out as they were being escorted out. Did you get any sense of where that was in relation to the venue where the shots were fired?
Yeah, you know, Whit, I know that there are buildings that do surround this fairgrounds area, but I don't exactly know which building in particular many of those witnesses have been referencing. It was chaos in the minutes that followed, and we did see law enforcement officials, some with canines, sniffing some areas as it was being roped off. And then, of course, we were all sort of escorted out in those moments. So I can't tell you exactly what direction that building was located in. I've heard the same exact thing from several witnesses, in fact. And something that we do know is that this area behind me, no one is going out, no one is going in. We were live on the air as Secret Service moved all of the press out of that area as well. We were told at the time that we would be let back in maybe within an hour or so to get the rest of our materials, some of our gear left inside, backpacks and personal belongings. All of that is now remaining inside as police continue to investigate what happened here hours ago, Whit.
And we know so many of those witnesses you spoke with, they're going to need time to process and deal with the trauma, what they witnessed inside the bloodshed in that event today. Rachel Scott for us. We can't thank you enough. Thank you so much. We also have been speaking with, as we noted, a number of people who were there at that Trump rally inside, describing what they saw, what they heard, and some of it very disturbing. Let's take a look.
I was positioned probably about maybe 20 feet away from the president at the point in time when he was making his address. I was to the right of the stage due to me being I was a speaker at the event. So I did my speech earlier today during the pre-program, and I was a few feet from where this all occurred. We heard the shots, and I thought it was, first thought it was fireworks because, you know, people are on edge, and any kind of loud boom you hear, you're going to think gunshots immediately, especially because of the environment of what was going on. And I turned around, and someone yelled medic, and I looked, and there was no way a medic could have got to that person in time. So I left my seat, took my tie off, I jumped over the barrier, and I ran to the individual. But when I got there, it was too late. The person was bleeding out through their head. And like I said, once again, respects to the family because this is a very tough time. But they were shot, and I tried to, you know, block the wound. I held a towel against it, and until a medical team arrived and got him out. And, you know, from there I helped the police and crowd control with getting people out of there because people were very nervous, people were very hesitant, and we had to move people fast and get them into a safe location opposite of where the shooter was at or said to be at. So I assisted with getting people down and getting people out. And I try to keep kids calm and just get people clear.
Wow, Rico. Obviously, we want to be sensitive to the victim's family.
Yes.
But can you tell us more about this person, where they were? Was it a man? Was it a woman?
Well, it was a male. It was a male victim. He was literally just sitting there in the stands. He had to be maybe 3 or 4 rows up from the bottom of the bleachers where everybody was sitting. And 1 second, where everyone's cheering and happy and listening to what Trump's saying, and the next minute, he's gone.
Rico, did you have any training in this sort of like first aid? I mean, this is life-saving aid that you're describing here.
I mean, I'm in the military. I'm in the 171st Air Refueling Wing, and you know we learn first aid and self-aid buddy care and basic training. And you know, at the point, as soon as I heard the shots and I seen and heard someone yell medic, my first instinct was, you know, I'm trained in self-aid. I'm trained in you know, applying a tourniquet, but I'm not trained to see someone's, you know, what I witnessed.
I mean, nobody can be trained for that. And we're getting the sense, Rico, not just from you, but from others, I think there's going to be some serious time, some healing that's going to need to take place for the people who are there. and saw all of this, and especially for you to see everything up close, and you got the sense early on that that this person was lost?
From understanding head wounds and how they operate, when I seen what I seen, I was afraid that that person was lost. And reading what has been done, said, and stated in the news so far, those are now facts, which is a shame.
Rico, I don't even know if these are the right words to ask this question because most people have never been in this situation, but how are you processing what you saw and what you witnessed?
I mean, one can only process what happened, hopefully as slow as possible. But my worry, my heart at this point in time is not for myself, but it's for the families of the loved one.
We just saw him, Trump, duck behind the podium, and then a Secret Service pile on top of him, and we heard the shots.
More like what we heard, the bullets rattling around the grandstand. One hit the speaker tower, and then chaos broke. We hit the ground, and the police converged to the grandstands.
I watched him kind of graze his ear, and then I heard a pop, and then he went down, and then I heard another pop, and then a Secret Service kind of came up to the stage. I mean, it was just a chaotic scene.
I could see his face. He was right there talking, having a good time. And, you heard one shot, two shot. It sounded like, bang, nothing crazy. And then you heard maybe 3 or 4 more, and that's when everyone got quiet, started panicking. Trump dropped right to the floor. I guess Secret Service jumped on top of him and shielded him. But, as soon as everyone in the crowd figured out what was going on, we all ducked, and my buddies just jumped on top of me, piled on top of me. And we had no idea what was going on. You're in total shock. You're shook, and, you can't feel your legs. But we were trying to decide if we wanted to get up and run, and we had really no idea what to do. And next thing you know, you see bullets, or you hear bullets flying, and I believe a bullet hit the hydraulic lift that was holding up the speakers, and that thing almost collapsed. There was hydraulic fluid and water spitting everywhere all over the crowd. And then before you know it, everyone just gets up and starts running. But
and
Trump
Stephen,
did stand.
Oh, forgive me. I'm sorry. There's a little bit of a delay, but on that note about everybody getting up and running, we're actually showing video that you shot on your cell phone. And this is the moment with people running out of the venue. Describe what that was like, and when were you actually able to get out?
It was pretty stressful. I'm looking around trying to make sure all my buddies who came with me were with me. And, it took probably a good 10 minutes to get out of there, to get out of the whole area. And, before you know it, there's ATVs and UTVs flying and ambulances and all that kind of stuff. And we're trying to figure out how to get out of there and get home. But we made it. And when we walked out to the road, they had, police blocking everything off. And we actually found out where the building was that the shooter was shooting from. They had it all taped off. I guess it was like an agricultural warehouse, something like that. So, it was pretty scary. It's like you're in the movies.
Stephen, forgive me again. I'm sorry. There's a little bit of a delay with the connection, but did you say that you were able to see the building that the shooter was allegedly perched on top of here? You said it was taped off by law enforcement. What did it look like?
It was like kind of like an airplane hangar, maybe, like a warehouse for agricultural equipment, I guess. ARC, AGC, something like that on the side. But once we were out, maybe 30, 40 minutes after, they were taping it off, investigating it. They had the dogs going and all that stuff. But there was traffic jams everywhere. It was kind of hard to.
How far away was that area from where the former president was standing?
Maybe 300, 400 yards, maybe less, honestly.
And Stephen, when you hear that people who were there in the crowd with you, other bystanders, at least one, maybe more, were killed, how does that make you feel?
Honestly, still kind of numb to it. It's hard to process all this. Your heart rate is through the roof, but best wishes for their family, and they were supporting the country that they love. And in the meantime, it's definitely sad, and it's heartbreaking, honestly.
And Stephen, we've been hearing from people on both sides of the aisle, Republicans, Democrats, independent candidate, RFK Jr., and all with the same sentiment, condemning political violence, saying there's no place in this country for something like this. And I just wonder, from your perspective too, you're out there, you're exercising your right to support a candidate. What message do you have for people out there? Because the country is at this political boiling point. There's so much division and anger and hatred right now from one side and the other. What would you like to tell people?
At the end of the day, whether you're on the left, the right, the center, or you don't believe in politics at all, we all still put our pants on in the morning. We all breathe the air and go to work, and a lot of these issues, in 10 years, no one even thinks about them or cares about them. So we're all people at the end of the day, and it's not worth taking someone's life over political beliefs or whatever. It's just senseless.
Some really powerful words from so many witnesses that we spoke with throughout the course of the evening. We are getting some new information about the shooter now and the FBI's involvement in the investigation. Let's go back to our Chief Justice correspondent, Pierre Thomas, in Washington. What more are you learning, Pierre?
Well, we've just been told that the FBI director, Chris Wray, has just briefed the President of the United States, Biden. He also has briefed the National Security Advisor. We're being told now and can confirm that this dead suspect is a male. They will confirm that the dead suspect is a male. He was apparently killed. The early information is by a Secret Service counter sniper who honed in on him after the shots were fired. A Secret Service counter sniper killed the suspect. Also, we're being told that they are in the process of trying to verify the suspect's identity. They want to be 1,000% sure that they have the right name, that they can do this detailed background investigation. It is now so critical for them to understand what this is and what the motivations might be. Until you can get that name really confirmed, you can't really do the appropriate social media. I'm told that there are more than one name that is being looked at in this situation. Again, this is an all-hands-on-deck situation. The FBI director now personally involved. They have FBI agents now on the scene, I'm being told, as we speak with, going through the evidence, trying to talk to witnesses, examining the area where the shooting took place. They are the lead. This is now a national security investigation of the highest priority.
And Pierre, I realize this is a fluid situation. You may not have the answer to this question, but I think because we've been on the air for hours, it's worth circling back to it. Is the belief still that there was a single shooter, or do we even know that at this point?
The information, the evidence thus far, single shooter, firing from the rooftop, as we reported, 200 to 300 yards away, using an AR-15 style rifle. The information we can now confirm is that the dead suspect is male, according to our source. They are now in the process of trying to make sure they have the proper identity, because everything flows from that. Who is this person? And then you can begin to piece together their recent life. They need to know everything, because that affects all of the security going forward with.
And all of this with the caveat that information can change as we get more details from law enforcement. Pierre Thomas, thank you so much for that. Let's go to Aaron Katursky now, our senior investigative correspondent, because Aaron, I understand there was a potential photo of the shooter. Do we have that yet, or is there confirmation that it is in fact the shooter?
Well, the photo is from Getty Images, and law enforcement sources who have seen it tell ABC News that it does appear to be the shooter. So they are taking a look at this image, again, from Getty Images, and they are under the working suspicion that this is, in fact, going to be the shooter. Now, as Pierre notes, they still have not shared a specific identity. They undoubtedly have a name that they're working with, scouring his background, talking to any known acquaintances or family members.
And Aaron, I don't mean to interrupt you. I just want to make clear to our viewers, because as you started speaking, there was a different photograph, but the photograph right now that is on the screen is the photograph that you were talking about. And once again, Aaron, if you can just describe what law enforcement sources are saying about this particular picture.
Yeah, the image comes from Getty Images, and it's being scrutinized by law enforcement officials now. But their working suspicion is that this appears to be the shooter. They have not released an identity, so they don't know for sure. But that is a working belief now of law enforcement officials that this image from Getty Images does in fact capture the person who may have tried to assassinate former President Trump at his rally earlier this evening in Pennsylvania.
Aaron Katersky, thank you. We're going to leave the picture up on the screen and go back to Pierre Thomas, because Pierre, I know you've been talking to your law enforcement sources. This gives us a clearer picture of what we're dealing with. Again, we were hearing over the course through your reporting and others that the shooter was on a rooftop in a perched location 200 to 300 yards away from the venue, from the president. What does this tell us from your sources in terms of how this event played out and what this individual was able to do?
Well, what I can tell you for a fact, that image that we have up on the screen right now is being circulated by law enforcement. They have that image from Getty. They are circulating it. The operating assumption is that it was likely the shooter. This information, this image is being passed around through various law enforcement agencies for their evaluation. That image that we are looking at is an image that law enforcement has. They have control of the image. They are using the image to study it closely, obviously, and build from there. The other thing I can tell you is that this investigation now is of the highest priority. The FBI director directly involved in this case, and because from this particular shooting incident, it affects the entire threat environment, which we already said earlier was extremely elevated. People have been warning for weeks and months that the rhetoric in this country had produced a spike in political threats that no one can remember seeing in recent memory, period, full stop. The AG very concerned about it from my reporting. The FBI director speaking over and over about his concerns about this particular moment. So right now, law enforcement across the country, we have a statement from the police here in Washington, D.C. A source just reached out saying that they will elevate security in Washington based on what took place as well. So this is, again, a moment where law enforcement is reevaluating everything with.
Pierre, thank you. Let's go back to Martha Raddatz, because Martha, throughout the evening, there have been these developments as we've been getting more information. And one thing that's really stood out to me is your sources. You've been speaking with military sources who early in the evening described what they heard in those gunshots and said that this was likely someone who fired from far away. And now we're getting more pieces to the puzzle here. And I just want to get a sense of your take on what you're seeing and what we're hearing from law enforcement now.
Exactly, and you have that elevated position that the Secret Service has talked about, that it was 200 to 300 yards away, and that the shots were fired from an AR-15. That is very similar to what the military trains on, the M4, and that can be really pretty accurate, especially with the scope, even that far away. Now, one of the big questions, and Pierre, of course, knows this well, is what the Secret Service does in a situation like this before all of this event happened. Do they go around the perimeter? I spoke just a few minutes ago with a former Secret Service agent who said the USS Secret Service counter sniper team covers the rooftops. They will survey buildings from 1,000 yards in. They will position based on the stage setup. There will be response teams, Secret Service and local police, that will respond based on counter sniper calls to clear rooftops or to open windows. This agent said the perimeter on outdoor events varies. Clearly, there were rooftops around 200 or 300 yards away. That will certainly be a question that they look into in this investigation about why those particular rooftops were not spotted or cleared, or what exactly happened. A sniper did take out that shooter. Likely a Secret Service sniper taking out that shooter, but not before we had, as the Secret Service said, 1 spectator killed and 2 left in critical condition.
And Martha, I want to hold this image on the screen right now for our viewers because, as we've been getting this report now that there was a counter sniper who took out the shooter, I don't have information on this photo, but it appears that this would be law enforcement taking up those positions. But Martha is still raising this massive question of how a rooftop within that perimeter that you described, may have been missed.
Well, I think it is almost impossible to cover everything with. It's something the Secret Service deals with all the time, and they bring in local law enforcement to that picture specifically that says police on the vest and Secret Service. That is clearly from the counter sniper team, someone from that team, whether that's the person who took out the shooter. We don't have that information, but it certainly could have been. And that person, that counter sniper person, was probably spanning around that perimeter. Again, this former agent saying this is just something they always do. They scan as much as possible, and heard those shots fired, heard multiple shots fired, and people hitting the ground, and I'm sure that sniper went into action. Yeah, as many as 8 rounds from that AR-style rifle. Martha, thank you so much for your reporting on this. Let's bring in Don Mahalik from former Secret Service, who's a contributor now, has been speaking with us. Donald, I just want to get your sense on this information that we're getting now about the shooter on a rooftop taken out by a counter sniper. What's your take on this and how these events may have unfolded?
Well, it sounds like the Secret Service counter snipers did their job. As Martha was talking about, whenever there's an event anywhere, the counter snipers go and they do their form of an advance. That form of an advance is looking at the entire area in and around the event space and setting up almost a grid pattern so they could identify locations and locations of interest. Looking and scanning all of those potential threat areas are part of what the counter snipers do, and they work with ground teams generally made up of Secret Service agents and local law enforcement called counter sniper response teams that they can call upon to respond to a potential situation to figure out what's going on. In this situation, it sounds like some of that was working, but what we're going to have now is the FBI is going to do the criminal investigation piece of this to look at the shooter, his motivations, what happened. But you're also going to have the Secret Service now doing a mission insurance investigation to look at the protective venue, what protective methodologies were in place, what worked, what gaps they may have had, and what they can close down in the future.
Yeah, so much ground to cover and still so many details and questions left unanswered. Donald, thank you so much. We appreciate it. I want to go back to Aaron Katursky. Aaron, we've been, throughout the night, only had a few details about the victims in this case, confirming that at least 1 person had been killed, a bystander, and then as many as 2 critically injured. You're getting some more information about the victims now?
Yeah, we now know that 2 others are in critical condition tonight. So this has had broader ramifications. Clearly, the attempted assassination of former President Trump is rightfully getting much of the attention. But there was a bystander that was killed, according to the Secret Service, and now we know from the hospital in Western Pennsylvania that 2 others have been critically hurt after this male gunman, who has still not been identified, fired from 200 to 300 yards away from an elevated position on a rooftop adjacent to the venue. He was able to fire off about 8 shots, law enforcement sources tell us, from an AR-15 style rifle.
These are some of the images here coming in, law enforcement outside that hospital where we're told that some of the victims are being treated. Aaron, thanks again. Let's go back to Mary Bruce at the White House. More information from President Biden.
Yeah, what we have now learned that the president has finally connected with Donald Trump. The 2 men have spoken. The White House, though, remaining tight-lipped on what was actually said on that call. They have not offered any kind of readout of this discussion, but we do know that the 2 have connected. These are not 2 men who speak often or really at all. Of course, the last time they saw each other was at that debate just a few weeks ago, but very little interaction then. We do know, of course, that the president earlier in the evening expressed how grateful he was to hear that Donald Trump was safe and doing well. well. He, offered his prayers for the former president and his family at that time. We also now can report that the president is now he is now making his way back to Washington tonight. He will be leaving Rehoboth Beach, Delaware, where he was expected to spend the weekend. Those plans now changing. The president, we are also told, tomorrow morning here at the White House will be receiving an updated briefing from Homeland Security and law enforcement officials. The president has been being updated by his team, of course, throughout the evening. And we did hear him come out very forcefully earlier in the night and condemn this kind of violence, saying that it is simply sick, saying there's no place in America for this kind of violence. And he said it's one of the reasons why we have to unite this country. As we have said, his campaign is also trying to turn down the political temperature, the political rhetoric in this country by really hitting the pause button here. As would be expected, they are pulling down all of their political communications. They are trying to pulling down their ads as quickly as they can across the country that target Donald Trump in any kind of way, anything that is of political nature. Because this is a moment that shouldn't be about politics, and that is the message that we are getting from the White House and the president's campaign. We don't know yet if, how this may affect the president's travel in the upcoming days. He's supposed to be in Texas on Monday, then on to Nevada on Tuesday and Wednesday. Of course, he has been trying to pivot a lot of the attention back and a lot of the spotlight away from questions about the president's political future and back to Donald Trump's agenda. But now all of this, everything in this race has changed because of the horrific events of today. And the president now making his way back to the White House so that he can continue to be briefed and monitor this situation in the coming hours and day.
Everything has changed. There's no question about that. Mary Bruce, thank you so much. I do want to bring in Nathan Reibner, who was one of the spectators in the audience today at that rally in Pennsylvania. Nathan, forgive me, I know you've been waiting on the phone for a while as we've been getting this new reporting, but if you can just walk us through what you witnessed firsthand.
First, I want to wish my condolences on the victims. It is mind-shattering to go to a Trump rally and encounter or endure what has happened. I was seated in the left bleacher section of the rally. I was maybe 20 feet away from one of the victims. It was, at first, the noises we heard, it sounded like a firecracker, the little things you throw at the ground, usually around July 4th. But then once I saw the dozens of people around me started dropping, you could tell things were very different. I looked at the stage, Secret Service rushed the president. People were terrified. It was, I know it's been about probably close to 4 hours since the shooting, but
and Ryan,
I'm at a little bit of a loss of words.
I can imagine, as anybody would be, and we can hear that emotion in your voice, in real time as you're trying to think through what happened hours ago. One of the things that has been very difficult to watch is, as we've played this video back, former President Trump goes down, the Secret Service pounces on him, and the one thing that you do hear in the background is you hear that screaming as members of the crowd recognize that someone has been hit. You said you were 20 feet away from one of the victims. What did you see happen to that person?
I saw that people were trying to encourage them first after everyone dropped and after everyone at least thought that the threat was not immediate. People started moving away from the person to give them room so that they could be moved out. There was no medic nearby. You guys had Rico on earlier. I saw Rico afterwards. He had blood all over his shirt. I remember I took a photo. That's something I'm never going to forget. I will never forget that image of him trying to help someone who was encountering the unimaginable.
What does this say to you? And I know that these thoughts are raw. This is fresh in your mind. You're seeing these images on television and now trying to compare that to what you witnessed firsthand with your own eyes. But how would you characterize this state in this country right now?
I answered an interview in late May over the Trump verdict, and right now things are deteriorating at an even more rapid rate than even most can imagine. I mean, everything we're going through with this election cycle is historic. I understand there have been some very contentious election cycles, like you look at 1968. I understand that some cycles are very contentious, but this absolutely is that beyond the political impact that's going to have to help Trump. This is a damaging image to the world. The man who is currently polled to win the presidency, who I wish the best of recovery. Everyone turned on the news and saw that he had been shot in the head. It's a very scary image to send to the world. It's a very scary image to send to people. I was next to someone in the audience that was there with her young daughter. I was across the walking path of the stage, in the other bleacher section. There was a young boy who was dressed up as Trump. I can't imagine the young people, the young children that were there watching the rally, and seeing that. I can't imagine people watching at home and everyone just not knowing what happened.
Yeah, the children in the crowd. We heard from a local mayor, John David Longo, who was there with his pregnant wife and described, forcing her to the ground and then having to jump on top of her to shield her from potential incoming gunfire. Nathan, thank you so much for your time. We appreciate you sharing your thoughts with us tonight.
All right. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Once again, our coverage does continue here, and I want to bring in Mark Updegrove, who's a presidential historian, joining us now. And Mark, I think it's worth picking up where Nathan, this witness, left off, talking about just the historic nature of this election cycle, unprecedented in so many different ways. This was a moment that many law enforcement officers had feared could happen. And here we are now, an investigation into the potential assassination attempt of a presidential candidate and former president. Put this into historical perspective for us. When was the last time we've seen something quite like this?
Well, first of all, I think it's a reflection of how divided and dangerous our political climate is currently. And Republican, Democrat, or Independent, we are all Americans, and this kind of political violence should have no place in American life. But unfortunately, as you are alluding to, it has in our past, in our recent past. In 2017, we had the shooting at a softball practice outside of Washington, and Representative Steve Scalise was hit. Gabby Giffords was hit in an assassination attempt in Tucson in 2011. Paul Pelosi, the husband of Nancy Pelosi, was attacked at the Pelosi home in 2022. And of course, we've seen assassination attempts and assassinations of presidents throughout our history. Most recently, the assassination attempt on President Reagan's life in 1981, just 69 days into his presidency. We have also seen the assassination attempt of a contender for the presidency, George Wallace, the governor of Alabama. Was gunned down in Maryland when he was campaigning as an independent for the presidency in 1972. So unfortunately, we have a long history of political violence, which, as President Biden suggested tonight, should have no place in America.
And Mark, what about as we're looking at all these horrible images, people are trying to look for some message of hope somewhere, right? There's multiple politicians on all sides of the aisle coming out condemning the violence, saying something like this should never happen. But when these events have happened in the past, what typically happens across the country in terms of a response, in terms of a recovery? Does peace often follow or not?
I think in the immediate days, there is a call for peace and there's a reflection of comity and civility and empathy. But I think then we get into debates about whether there should be gun control or gun reform in our country. And then the political divisions once again are sown. If you look back at the assassination attempt on President Reagan's life, America came together, and you saw approval ratings for President Reagan soar in the wake of that. It actually helped President Reagan politically, and I think to some degree Americans united when they saw an assassination attempt of their president. So I think it's a mixed bag. We saw with the Paul Pelosi attack that I mentioned, which is the most recent of those that I enumerated, we saw more division. We saw more ugliness particularly from the Republicans after that, really mocking what had happened to Paul Pelosi. So a mixed bag and again, I think a reflection of a very divided time in American life.
A mixed bag and certainly a test that this country will face in the days and weeks to come. Mark Updegrove, thank you so much for your perspective. We really appreciate it. I want to go back to Milwaukee because we've got our political director and bureau chief Rick Klein there, as well as our chief Washington correspondent John Karl. The two of you have had to go inside. There was some weather threatening your live locations. But again, all of this is happening right on the eve of the Republican National Convention and all of these events that were planned and the thousands of people that are expected to participate. What more are you hearing from your sources about what we can expect in the next 48 hours?
Well, the first thing we're hearing from RNC officials is that this convention is going on. I've got a statement that was just released by Reince Priebus, of course, the former chairman of the RNC, former chief of staff for Donald Trump, who is the chairman of the host committee here. He says, President Trump is in my prayers after surviving this assassination attempt. And he says, we are heartbroken that reports indicate at least one innocent person has been killed and perhaps others have been injured. This horrific violence has no place in America. But then this is the key line. Guests have already begun to arrive in Wisconsin, and we look forward to working with the Republican National Committee to welcome everyone to Milwaukee this week. This convention is proceeding as planned, and I think what you're going to see is this assassination attempt as something of a rallying cry for Republicans here. We're already seeing Republicans using the image of former President Trump with his arm raised and the blood coming down his face, used as a symbol, which I think was going to be a defining symbol for this convention.
And Rick, on that point too, obviously there's the rallying cry part of it, but also the rhetoric that we've seen. Some people, calling, condemning any sort of political violence, but then other people pointing the finger and placing blame.
Yeah, and the blame that has been directed particularly at President Biden himself has come from very high levels of the party, including Senator J.D. Vance, who in a couple of days could easily be on the ticket with Donald Trump. A lot of Republicans are saying something out loud that is right now, I think, probably not justified by any of the facts that are out there in suggesting that some of the rhetoric that Biden has used somehow contributed to this. We just don't know anything about this gunman or enough about the gunman to be able to say something like that. And we are at a time where people need to be calming the tensions that are everywhere right now because they are boiling over. And I think John's right. This is going to be a rallying cry, and you're going to hear a lot of really sharp and really maybe even dangerous rhetoric in the coming days.
Rick Klein, John Karl, stand by. We'll come back to you in just a moment, but I do want to go back to Mary Bruce at the White House. You've been in close contact with the Biden administration tonight. The president has been talking to his advisors. He was briefed by the Secret Service. He spoke with former President Donald Trump. What more are they saying tonight?
It is notable that they are not saying much more about that conversation between the president and his rival, the former president. Just the fact that they spoke, though, is really remarkable when you consider, how rare it is. I mean, before the debate last month, it had been years since the two of them had talked. And even at the debate, they barely, I don't even think you could say, exchanged niceties. The president is now making his way back here to the White House. He's going to continue to be briefed by his team. He's going to have a briefing tomorrow morning with his national security team, continuing to try and keep a close eye on all of this. The question now, one of many, is what kind of impact this is going to have on the president's campaign. We are already seeing efforts by some to sort of politicize this moment. Of course, as Rick notes, we have no idea what motivated or drove this gunman to do this, but you are already seeing many point the finger, or some pointing the finger at President Biden and his rhetoric. That is something, not surprisingly, that his campaign forcefully rejects. But how will this change the tone and tenor of this campaign in the coming days? Of course, as President Biden has been, under tremendous fire and fighting for his political future, as we have seen so many Democrats coming out and calling for him to exit this race. But for now, in this moment, the president is responding to this, as a president first, but also as a candidate. Of course, we are seeing his campaign pull down their political communications. We are seeing them pull down their political ads to focus on this moment, to try and dial down the temperature in this country and make the point that violence like this is simply unacceptable. As the president said, it is sick and has no place in America.
And John Carl, back to you there in Milwaukee with Rick Klein, because we know that the large crowds is something that Donald Trump obviously favors. It's a hallmark of his campaign. He wants to pack as many people in as possible. So I would imagine even the idea floated towards him that they would scale back the convention in any way is not something he wants. If he is able, he's going to try to be there.
I mean, I've witnessed Trump at rallies kind of call out the Secret Service and saying, why are these barricades up there? I want to let people get closer to the stage. I was at a rally in Iowa during the 2022 midterms where he actually got his staff to remove some of the barriers so more of the crowd could come closer to the stage. He's not going to want to scale back any of this thing. I was talking to one of the many people that are involved in planning here, not sure how this was going to affect the convention, as they were all scrambling to try to figure out what actually happened today and what the former president's condition is. But this person said to me, my assumption is not just that this convention will continue as planned, but that this convention will continue with a vengeance, with a new energy, using this attempted assassination as a rallying cry, as a symbol, and certainly not as a reason to scale back any of the events here in the convention. Of course, the Secret Service is going to have other concerns. Law enforcement here is going to have other concerns about keeping this place secured. But as you and I talked about earlier, Whit, we are in one of the most secure places in the country right now. I mean, they've already erected barricades for blocks all around this convention center. There is already a massive security presence in the city of Milwaukee. It certainly isn't going to be scaled back. If anything, it's going to be ramped up.
And Rick, you and I were talking days earlier just about this event in Pennsylvania and how significant it could be. All eyes were on this event. There was, as names were being thrown out there for potential running mates, there was the possibility of at least a hint or a tease or maybe even an announcement. What does this do now to this Veep stakes, the potential running mates? And, clearly some of them are out there on Twitter or X and making comments in support of the former president. Do you think this changes anything? Were any of them likely working to the last possible minute to get the job?
Yeah, we reported just hours before this rally in Pennsylvania that 3 finalists met with Donald Trump privately at Mar-a-Lago in the last couple of days. Somehow they avoided reporters who were tracking the movements of these individuals. We're talking about Senator J.D. Vance, Senator Marco Rubio, and the North Dakota Governor Doug Burgum. All 3 met with Donald Trump in a very small setting, maybe even as one-on-one type setting for the first time in this process. He's talked to them informally, but to be involved in the interviews, he was clearly getting close to making that decision. He was teasing the possibility in fundraising appeals and in postings and in interviews that this would be the event. This would be the time that he actually announces his vice presidential pick. The timing would sort of fit going into the convention. We find out that he never had those plans, and he would hope to do this as sort of a big reveal on Monday at the convention. I think all the plans have to be a little bit up in the air. I would even say that if he hadn't made up his decision before, or up his mind before, it may be that there's other factors that he is now considering, including how they're responding to this event that is upended so much about politics and so much about American political discourse in the last few hours.
It sure
in fact,
has.
Rick, I had actually heard from one of the former president's advisors about an hour before this rally was to get underway, we had received, and we've been going back and forth, are they going to announce it, are they not? We had earlier today, we were told, no, he's not going to announce it at the event. But just about, less than an hour before the event, I got a call like, hey, you better be ready. We're hearing that, he may just do it. So there was a heck of a lot of anticipation at this event, although, he didn't have the typical entourage with him of other officials, because so many people have already come to Milwaukee, were already en route to Milwaukee. So a heck of a lot of the spotlight was very bright on that event in Pennsylvania today.
The spotlight bright on the event, and sadly, just a horrific scene that played out. And the former president now injured and recovering, the slight injury, as he described, to the top of his ear following that attempted assassination. John and Rick, thank you. I want to go back to Martha Raddatz, because, Martha, you've been following this very closely, talking to some of your sources, including military sources who've been sort of analyzing some of this data and information as it's been coming in. What more are you learning tonight?
Well, basically what they thought in the very beginning seems to have happened, that this was off-site, that it was not in a secure area. It was off 200, 300 yards away from the actual event, away from Donald Trump. But the shooter still managed to fire 8 rounds from an AR-15. I think about that crowd, and that crowd was there for a political event. The campaign will surely go on. The election will surely go on. But no one will forget this day. We have to remember that this is a day where someone tried to assassinate a former president and a presidential candidate. And in that assassination attempt, killed one of those supporters at that political rally and left 2 others in critical condition, according to the Secret Service. So I think that is really what we have to think about tonight. The campaign will go on. Donald Trump made that very clear, just putting that fist up. It looks to me like he was saying, fight, fight, as he was helped off the stage there. He will certainly, as John and Rick said, talk about that this week. They will talk about this at the RNC. But hovering over all of this is, who is that suspect? What motivated him? Why would he take action like that? And because that suspect is dead, you can imagine that there will be conspiracy theories for a very long time, no matter what they find out and prove.
Yeah, sadly, there's no question about that. Martha Raddatz, thank you. And just to point out to our viewers, some of this video that you're seeing, these are new aerials from our affiliate there that has been following this scene, this chopper video. This is overlooking the area off in the distance. There was a wider shot that you could see the American flag that was hanging. There it is. That was the venue inside. But again, law enforcement saying that this shooter was perched up on one of those rooftops about 200 to 300 yards away. And now for the first time, it's kind of coming into a clearer picture that just how much space there was. There are a number of buildings there where he could have been. Once again, we're still just getting these details coming in about the investigation and attempted assassination of the former President Trump. Before we go, though, we do have a recap of all the troubling developments on this historic day. ABC's Rachel Scott was there at the rally and has been speaking with eyewitnesses who were there, too.
This is the shocking moment. Chaos erupted at Donald Trump's rally in Butler, Pennsylvania.
If you want to really see something that said, take a look at what happened.
You can hear several pops and see the former president grabbing his ear, ducking for cover behind the podium. Secret Service agents rushing the stage, surrounding Trump, shielding him, taking him down to the ground. The screaming crowd looking on in horror. A short time later, agents carefully lifting the former president up.
I got you, sir. I got you, sir.
Let me get my shoes on.
Hold that in your head. It's bloody.
Blood clearly seen on his face, Trump pumping his fist. Agents whisking the former president off the stage, down the stairs to a waiting armored SUV, rushing him to a local medical center.
We heard what we appeared to be gunfire coming. The former president was rushed off the stage. Right now, we're at Secret Service. He's being escorted into his vehicle. This was a chaotic moment that just played out right here in Pennsylvania. People running and rushing to the ground as they heard those apparent shots fired.
Then pandemonium, thousands of people running for cover.
Unbelievable.
Tonight, the Trump campaign releasing a statement saying the former president is fine and being checked out at a local medical facility. Donald Trump Jr. telling ABC News he spoke to his father, who remains in the hospital, and described Trump as in good spirits, saying he remains under observations.
Just hours ago, this area was lined with Trump supporters. They entered that tent right there to be screened by Secret Service, going through metal detectors, their belongings detected. Now, this is the space where you have Trump supporters that are leaving, panicked and confused, as Secret Service agents rush us out of this area and back to our cars.
Tonight, the crowd still in disbelief.
Tell me what you saw and what you heard. You said that you heard the popping sounds and you got down?
Sounds. So first you think like maybe firecrackers, but it continued, and then somebody yelled, "Get down." We got down, and we huddled, and we started praying.
Tonight, local officials telling ABC News those sounds were in fact gunshots. Live rounds fired from a rooftop adjacent to the venue outside the security perimeter. Tonight, law enforcement recovering an AR-style rifle. This is being investigated as an attempted assassination. And tonight, the local district attorney telling ABC News at least one person is dead and the shooter is dead as well. A law enforcement official briefed on the investigation tells us this image is believed to show the suspected gunman on the roof. Tonight, President Biden addressing the nation.
I have tried to get a hold of Donald. He's with his doctors. Apparently he's doing well. I plan on talking to him shortly, I hope, when I get back to the telephone. Look, there's no place in America for this kind of violence. It's sick. It's sick. It's one of the reasons why we have to unite this country. We cannot allow for this to be happening. We cannot be like this. We cannot condone this. But the idea that there's political violence or violence in America like this is just unheard of. It's just not appropriate. And everybody must condemn it.
And moments ago, former President Donald Trump posting on Truth Social, thanking the Secret Service, saying, "I want to extend my condolences to the family of the person at the rally who was killed, and also to the family of another person who was badly injured. It is incredible that such an act could take place in our country. I was shot with a bullet that pierced the upper part of my right ear. I knew immediately that something was wrong and that I heard a whizzing sound, shots, and immediately felt the bullet ripping through the skin. Much bleeding took place, so I realized then what was happening. God bless America."
And Rachel Scott is back with us now. She was there at that rally in the beginning. She is still there now. Rachel, you've talked to a number of witnesses, but I also wonder, have you been in touch with the Trump campaign, some of the officials that you were likely speaking with who were there at the event, who then fled with the president? Are they revealing anything else about what happened?
Yeah, there is a sense of shock among Trump officials as well. They were inside of this rally along with us and the former president's supporters, members of the press. They were there too, also diving for cover. Many of the former president's aides, when we heard those gunshots erupt and the panic that set in and the chaos that occurred just right after that. Here now, right behind me, is this active crime scene that you have here. And there were a number of people that were here. Their belongings are left inside. It was sort of this moment where you took what you could and you just sort of raced out. There were some people running out. There were some people that had to be pushed out by Secret Service. They were told to just take what you can, leave everything else. There were probably about a dozen people that were lined up here at these gates behind me asking law enforcement when they'll be able to get back in. They were just told that they would not have access to their personal belongings for some time, maybe a couple hours, maybe a day. There are several people here who actually have their keys to their cars. They can't drive home at this point. Obviously, this is an active crime scene that's occurring behind me here tonight. And still you have this American flag that's hanging over that crime scene, an attempted assassination of a former president, a Republican nominee in this race. It is an unprecedented twist to an already historic campaign win.
Rachel Scott, stand by. Just reminding our viewers who are tuning in right now as we hit the top of the hour, it is just past 11 o'clock in the east, 8 o'clock in the west. We've been on this for hours now. I'm Whit Johnson in New York, following the major developments. Former President Donald Trump in an attempted assassination at one of his events in Butler, Pennsylvania. He was there for a rally, a political rally. You see the events here. There were the popping sounds in the crowd, the former president reaching for his right ear before going down to the deck right there on the stage. The Secret Service surrounding the former president, jumping on him to protect him, forming somewhat of a human shield there before eventually bringing former President Trump back to his feet and escorting him off the stage. You can also hear the screams from the crowd because, as we know now, that there was a shooter who was perched on a rooftop, fired up to 8 shots from an AR-style rifle, and at least one spectator, one person in the stands there, was killed. We know that 2 others were taken in critical condition to a nearby hospital. The former president was also escorted, as you can see in some of these images. Once they got him back to his feet, they escorted him off the stage. And in some of the pictures, you can see that blood trickling down the right side of his face. The crowd responding to Trump when he got back to his feet and started cheering. The former president then walking off with the Secret Service, as you see here, ultimately into a car, being escorted off to a nearby hospital. We're told by family that the president is doing fine tonight, that he did suffer a minor injury as a bullet passed through the top of his right ear. But the president and his family, they've been asking for prayers for the victims who were killed, and also thanking the Secret Service for their quick actions in this assassination attempt. We also know that the Secret Service is involved in the investigation. The FBI now leading the investigation. We've been getting information about the shooter. They have confirmed that it's a man. They believe at this point it's a lone suspect. No indication that anybody else was involved, but that man was perched on a rooftop some 200 to 300 yards away from that venue, once again with an AR-style rifle. We're going to bring in some of our other correspondents and contributors here in just a moment. Forgive me, I'm getting instructions. I can't do that. You've got to keep moving it forward. Okay. We've been speaking with eyewitnesses all day. Let's go ahead and listen.
Tell me what you saw and what you heard. You said that you heard the popping sounds and you got down?
Sounds. At first you think like maybe firecrackers, but it continued, and then somebody yelled, "Get down." We got down, and we huddled and we started praying. And we just started praying, and thank God, a little while later, we got up. When we saw other people get up, we saw Trump get up, raise his fist like I'm okay, and we kept praying.
I felt really bad. I'm worried about our grandchildren. What kind of life are they going to have if this goes on, if people don't have the right to say what they want?
You told me that you were near the very front. You weren't very far.
No, we were like from here to where that thing is.
And you got down. You said you got down immediately.
Yeah. Yeah, everybody yelled, "Get down!" My daughter-in-law, Lisa, she said for us to hurry up and get down.
Well, I mean, I saw all the Secret Service kind of cover Trump. They did a really good job about that, making sure he was protected, telling everyone to get down. So I think they did take a good care of making sure everyone was understanding what was going on and being serious but not freaking everybody out.
What was your initial reaction when you heard those popping noises?
To get down. Yeah, so I actually my boyfriend pushed me on the ground and went on top of me, which was really nice. But I think a lot of people were a little too shocked to understand what was going on originally, for sure. But I think everyone listened pretty well, and it was handled pretty well.
Did you see some of that commotion that was playing out on the other side of the bleacher, where we saw law enforcement agents sort of swarm around another individual, or did you ultimately just rush out?
No, we were there for a minute because they did tell us to go back down again just in case. I think that was good because it helped calm people down. But I think one of the stands that I was next to, they did carry out a man, and there was another one that might have been injured. I'm not 100% sure, but definitely one at least. And on the other stand on the other side, because I was on the right, on the left, there were a bunch of men in uniform surrounding someone. So that was interesting to see.
You said that you were very impressed by the speed in which Secret Service was able to get on that stage within seconds of all of us hearing those popping sounds.
Yeah, absolutely. They did a great job. I definitely felt protected in the situation. The sniper was on it, watching on guard. Everyone on the scene did a great job. I mean, of course it was nerve-wracking in the moment, but I never felt like I was in danger, which was cool. They were on the president, which I'm very thankful of, and they did a great job protecting him and getting him out as quick as possible. He is doing good, which is good. Yeah.
I'm the Republican nominee for the Senate in Pennsylvania. I was in the front row, and President Trump had just announced me and said he was going to have me come up on the stage, and said, well, wait a minute. And then there were a number of shots I think probably 7 or 8 shots. It wasn't clear whether they would come from one place or 2 places. At least I couldn't tell. And immediately there was a swarm of Secret Service officers that got on top of and knocked down President Trump and got on top of him. And then he stood back up, and you sort of saw this fist come out, sort of defiant that it looked like he was okay, but you couldn't tell for sure. It looked like there was some blood, but it wasn't obvious. And then the entire crowd went to the ground because we weren't sure whether the shots were done. And then unfortunately, over my shoulder, someone had clearly been hit. I was on the ground, and up in the bleachers, probably 3 or 4 bleachers behind me. It looked like there was a man who was severely injured. There was a lot of blood, and his people around him were trying to administer first aid. And then some police officers came in and carried him out, and presumably took him to get first aid. That's really all I could see. I don't know if there were other people injured, and I don't know if there was anybody apprehended, because as you might imagine, once that happened, the crowd was very chaotic, and it was very hard to know what was going on. And we're still there at the rally, just sitting trying to get out because the traffic is so backed up.
And Dave, your account seems to confirm some of this reporting that we're getting about a shooter and potential bystanders who were hurt. Just talk more about your initial reaction. I mean, seeing this, you're running for Senate in the state of Pennsylvania. You're about to walk up on the stage. You're getting introduced by the former president, and then you hear these shots ring out and the chaos in the crowd. What was going through your mind in that moment?
Well, it takes a minute to process. People started to panic all around. You could feel, people were very scared, and so, everybody just dropped to the ground. And it felt very obvious that the president was under assault, and very much at risk. And it wasn't clear that he was okay to begin with. And then, once it started to sink in, you're thinking, are there still shooters out there? Are they going to target other people? And, it's just like these, situations. I was in the military previously. You realize over time that the facts start to come together. So you got to be careful not to draw too many conclusions early on. But I think what we all felt was a sense of, oh my Lord, everybody's in danger because there's clearly a shooter, at least one shooter in the crowd, and maybe more. And really, I think scary for everybody who was there. And shocking, even more than scary, just shocking, because you were in the middle of this rally, and it was kind of fun, and people were enthusiastic, and all of a sudden it was turned upside down.
What does this say to you about our state of division and the politics in this country right now?
Well, I don't want to draw any conclusions before I know more about it. But, obviously it's, if you're a public official, if you're a presidential candidate and, your safety's at risk, that's scary for all of us, no matter what party you're in. And so I think it's a moment to take stock. And, you had 15,000. It seemed, it was a huge crowd. I was told by the law enforcement people there are 15,000 people who were enthusiastically supporting their candidate. And all of a sudden, the former president, his life is at risk, and what were peaceful people in the audience are wounded, potentially, fatally. I mean, that's unacceptable, and it's not a matter of party. That's just unacceptable in our great country.
I do want to go to Leonard Verdetto, who is an eyewitness who was there at the rally today. He's joining us now on the phone. Leonard, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. How you doing? Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely, Leonard. We're so grateful that you are okay. Can you just walk us through what happened and what you saw?
Sure, absolutely. So everybody was excited to see the former president coming out. We were all, excited, and we were all happy. We were all joyful. We were all there for each other. Then the former president was giving his speech. Then moments later, there was some, popping sounds that were going off. There were about maybe 6 or 7 to 8 shots that were happening. None of us really registered at the time, but then all people were saying, "Get down, get down." Even I was saying, "Get down." Other people were saying, "Get down" as well. And, we were all praying. We were praying to Yeshua, the Lord Jesus, and we were praying to him to keep us safe, keep us protected. But unfortunately, what happened was, someone did get shot. What I do hear is that I think 2 people did get shot, that to the best of my knowledge. And I believe that, the former president, which I'm glad he is safe. So.
Now, Leonard, and again, we don't have all these things confirmed yet, so this is your perspective here. But when you say that you believe that 2 people were shot, could you actually see people, potential victims?
What I seen, and to the best of my knowledge, sir, is that and again, I was hearing it from other news sources as well. But what I first seen there was blood on a couple of people. Someone was shot just about 5 feet right behind us, to be honest with you. So we were that close, and thank God we weren't shot either.
And where were you located? We're looking at the video right now. This is the former president being brought back to his feet after those shots were fired. Were you on the stands behind Donald Trump, or were you in front of him?
If you're looking exactly at him, we'd be on the left side, actually. We were the left side of the other stands where you've seen those big TVs.
So the left side of the stands facing the president or behind the former president?
Facing the president. We were more on the sides, looking on the side of the president, so facing him.
And Leonard, let me just ask you too. Obviously, you go to we've been talking about this, the division in this country, the polarization. But here you are. Obviously, you're exercising your right to support whichever politician you believe in. And you go to an event like this, you don't expect there to be violence. What's in your heart right now?
Well, what's in the heart right now is I'm encouraging the American people to pray to Lord Jesus, because right now our country's divided.
Our coverage continues right here on ABC News. For some parts of the country in the central and eastern time zones, we're going to send you to your local news next. For the rest of us, stay with us here as our coverage continues right here on ABC. And once again, for those of you staying with us and those just tuning in, we are covering an attempted assassination of former President Donald Trump. All of this playing out at a rally today in Pennsylvania in Butler. You see that moment there as the shots rang out. Witnesses reporting what they thought at first were maybe fireworks going off, but then suddenly the horror of what took place started becoming clearer and into focus, and you could see the Secret Service jumping on the former president, taking him to the ground, ultimately escorting him away and taking him off to the hospital. We are getting new information about the shooter. Law enforcement sources telling us that it was a single male shooter, and this is what they know at the time, who was perched on a rooftop nearby, maybe 200 to 300 yards away, and was armed with an AR-style rifle that was used to carry out this shooting, and was then taken out and killed by a counter sniper with the Secret Service. Let's bring in our senior investigative correspondent, Aaron Katersky, who's been with us all night getting some of this information from law enforcement. Aaron, what else can you tell us about the shooter, but you're also hearing more about the victims?
Well, one of them was killed, and then 2 others are in critical condition, in addition to former President Trump, who himself in a statement said he was grazed by a bullet by his ear. Now, the Secret Service has not fully determined all the ballistics. We know that the shooter was able to get off about 8 shots, according to law enforcement sources who've been briefed on the investigation. Those 8 shots coming from an AR-15 style rifle, while the shooter was in an elevated position some 200 to 300 yards away on a rooftop adjacent to the rally venue. One of the key pieces of the investigation, Whit, is why that position was available. And then, of course, they want to know urgently more about this shooter. I'm told there is a name that law enforcement is now working with. The FBI is the lead agency, along with the Secret Service and police in Pennsylvania. They are scouring that individual's social media, talking to any known associates and relatives to see what they can learn. But they are wanting to make sure that they have everything contained. At this point, the belief is there was just one, and they are working to confirm that now.
Aaron, thank you. And just a reminder to our viewers what you're seeing. These are aerial images coming in from our affiliate in Pennsylvania there. And it gives you a sense of just all the different rooftops and the buildings nearby. And as the camera pulls back, there you see where the American flag is hanging, where former President Trump was speaking at the time. So plenty of buildings nearby. The Secret Service goes around and tries to clear that space in advance. But something happened here, and we don't have the answers to what went wrong or if there was some kind of security lapse. I do want to bring in Pierre Thomas, who's also been following along, talking to law enforcement. Pierre, you know that you've been getting word from the Secret Service. They have briefed the President Biden on this. They always do a perimeter scan of the area ahead of time, but a lot of questions about how this happened tonight.
Indeed, and we already have the House Oversight Committee calling on the Secret Service director to appear at a hearing later this month to talk about.
You have been watching live coverage from ABC News. WFAA News at 10 starts now.
Take a look at what happened.
The nation shock. The world watching.
There's no place in America for this kind of violence. It's sick. It's sick.
An attempt on former President Donald Trump's life. We've got live team coverage right now.
Tonight, a moment in history. Former President Donald Trump survives being shot during a rally in Pennsylvania. I'm Teresa Woodard with senior political reporter Jason Whiteley, and we have witnessed a stunning 5 hours or so.
Teresa, indeed so. This kind of political violence is something this country has not seen for decades. It was tonight about 5:15 this evening, Dallas time, when we watched Secret Service agents jump on the stage there in Butler County, Pennsylvania, to cover Donald Trump, then help the bleeding former president down the stairs to a waiting SUV. These images here are no doubt going to become iconic in American political history. Trump said he was grazed by the gunfire. You could see him grabbing his ear with the blood there on the side of his face. Within the last few hours, Donald Trump did post on social media that the upper right part of his right ear was pierced by a bullet, but Trump said that he is okay. Sadly, at least one bystander was shot and killed by the gunman. 2 other people reportedly in critical condition at this hour. We do want to show you that video again of just how this chaotic moment unfolded. Take a look here.
What happened?
Just chilling to watch that here. We are told that Donald Trump is going to be okay. Within the last couple of hours here, the Republican National Convention gave ABC News a statement saying that Trump looks forward to joining his supporters in Milwaukee, essentially confirming that this incident is not going to keep the former president from the RNC rather, which is going to schedule to start 48 hours from now, Monday, there in Milwaukee, Teresa.
All right, let's talk a little bit more about the suspect who authorities say is dead. The Secret Service confirmed tonight one of their agents took out that suspect who was firing from an elevated position outside of the rally venue. ABC News sources say the shooter used an AR-15 style rifle and fired about 8 rounds from 200 to 300 yards away.
You know, Trump's rallies draw huge crowds. They always have. He has held them here in North Texas before, but this attack this evening threw supporters into a chaotic situation. Here's some video from right after the shooting from another camera, another angle here. Law enforcement helping rescue spectators who got hurt. It's not clear, though, exactly how these people were hurt, whether it might have been the bullet, shrapnel, or anything else.
You can just see the panic and the chaos there. Tonight, we are going to walk you through what we know about what happened and what it means for the presidential campaign, for the American people. In this deeply divided time in our nation's history, people on both sides of the aisle are united in condemning this violence.
And tonight, President Biden has changed his travel plans and heading back to the White House. ABC News reporting that Biden and Trump just spoke with each other on the phone within the last hour or so here. But before that conversation on the phone, President Biden did address the nation. Here's what he had to say.
There's no place in America for this kind of violence. It's sick. It's sick. It's one of the reasons why we have to unite this country. We cannot allow for this to be happening. We cannot be like this. We cannot condone this.
We are going to bring in WFAA's Richard Solomon now. He is in our newsroom. Richard, all of this clearly happened on camera. We saw it a few minutes ago. Certainly a scary scene on stage, but of course for everyone in attendance as well.
I mean, Teresa, Jason, the moments following those gunshots were absolutely chaotic. You saw in the video people ducking for cover. You even heard screams of terror. And I do want to warn you, tonight. You will see blood in some of the pictures that I'm going to share with you, but I want to show you this video first. Take a look.
Steve, you good? Yeah. We got it. Where's Mark?
Chaos that we just described. This video was recorded by a man who was at the rally. You see people everywhere frantically just trying to get away from the venue. And these pictures, the blood staining the bleachers. And tonight we do have reaction from people who were there, who were in the crowd as all this happened. Take a listen.
You just seen him like swipe his ear there, you know, the next thing you know, you heard other bullets.
You know, it's a bullet out of the blue, so it's very shocking. It's just, I think a lot of people in the crowd just thought it was fireworks going off. I knew immediately it was gunshots. I knew they were close, and then when I saw someone get hit and go down, that's when I knew it was probably serious.
Still in the back of my mind, there was the thought of the individual who was shot behind us. There was the thought of my wife, who was still on the ground, whose safety and well-being, of course, is my top priority, and it's just a sad situation all around.
Very scary moments there indeed. Now tonight we do know the Secret Service and other agencies are investigating this shooting, and of course we here at WFAA will keep you updated as soon as we learn any more new information. For now, live in the newsroom tonight, I'm Richard Solomon. Back to you in the studio.
All right, Richard, thank you. So politically, what happens next? We do know, of course, Trump survived what the FBI is investigating as an assassination attempt.
Yeah, Teresa, but a lot still remains uncertain. Yeah. What happened tonight will change this campaign for Trump and for Biden. It's going to really change the way law enforcement and Secret Service protect candidates. Matt Makowiak's chairman of the Travis County Republican Party, and he took our call about what the coming hours and the coming days might really look like.
Donald Trump thrives on these big rallies. Do you think he has more of these in the future?
Yeah, I mean, he's going to get a lot of different advice about that. First of all, I think he's going to want to do more rallies, but I imagine both he and his wife, Melania, the former First Lady, are going to have lots of questions about security. It could be that the crowds will be smaller. It could be he'll be behind bulletproof see-through glass, like what you see the Pope use. It could be it'll be only in indoor locations where they can completely control a site. Secret Service is going to have to completely reassess what kinds of locations he can hold rallies at, because this cannot happen again. I mean, this bullet was a millimeter or a centimeter from killing him instantly. It apparently grazed his ear. You know, you want to talk about an unthinkable moment. Imagine if Trump had been assassinated. Imagine the way the country would have reacted to that. Imagine what that would have meant. It's unthinkable, but it's not unimaginable given what we just witnessed.
Unthinkable indeed there, Teresa. Tonight, Texas politicians are sharing their reactions on social media to the shooting there in Pennsylvania. We also talked to a few of them directly tonight about what happened, including Congressman Keith Self, who we reached at his home in McKinney tonight.
This doesn't happen and hasn't happened in this country for a half century.
Well, it hasn't happened for a half century, and people get they get placid about things like this because it hasn't happened. Therefore, it can't happen. Well, it can happen, and we saw it today. I will guarantee you that the Secret Service is going to have an after-action report, and they're going to tighten their procedures up as well, because they're like everyone else. It hasn't happened for so long, therefore, probably won't happen. Well, today it happened, and we're going to pay some consequences of that until we tamp down the temperature of the political environment in this country. It's got to happen, Jason.
Congressman, thank you for the time.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
We also heard from Governor Greg Abbott posting on X tonight, quote, "They tried to jail him. They tried to kill him. It will not work," he said. He is indomitable. Senator Ted Cruz called the shooting horrific, wrong, and evil. His Democratic challenger, Colin Allred, said he condemns the attack and he prays that the president makes a complete recovery. And former President George W. Bush here in Dallas tonight in a statement said, quote, "Laura and I are grateful that President Trump is safe following the cowardly attack on his life."
Tonight, so many Americans are wondering how this could have happened and what it's going to mean for candidates on the campaign trail.
And we have two big events coming up here in the next week. We already talked about the Republican National Convention that happens Monday in Milwaukee. President Biden's schedule is in flux right now. He is returning to the White House tonight, as we mentioned. Monday afternoon, though, President Biden was supposed to be here in Texas at the LBJ Library in Austin to mark 60 years since the Civil Rights Act became law. Right now, it's uncertain whether that event is going to happen, whether the White House will keep that on his schedule.
WFAA's Janelle Fort is with us now. She's going to break all of this down from a security perspective. I know you were talking with some security experts tonight, so what are you hearing, Janelle?
Well, yeah, I spoke with Greg Schaefer. He's ex-FBI. He now runs a security firm here in Dallas, and he really stressed how what happened today is going to have major implications on how the candidates campaign for the rest of this election cycle. He told me the violence we saw today really shows how polarized American politics are right now. And he says what that means is more pressure on the Secret Service.
So the Secret Service definitely will be doing everything they can humanly possible to make sure something like this does not happen when President Biden visits Texas. They're always afraid of copycats. They're always afraid of something else, like this happening. And again, we don't know if there's any co-conspirators out there or if this individual is affiliated with any kind of group or terrorist organization. We don't know that yet. So this is going to really jack up the security for both the President Trump and President Biden's details. Absolutely.
Now, Schaefer also told me security for these types of rallies includes Secret Service, local law enforcement, and SWAT teams on standby. There's also a lot of extensive pre-planning for potential threats and then surveillance during the actual event. So now the big task is figuring out how the suspect slipped through the cracks.
What went wrong here? I mean, it's hard. You can't put a pin on that right now. It's just way too early. Bottom line is, the president is safe. He was wounded, but he was definitely survived that little nickel in his ear. So you can look at it as a success, not necessarily a failure.
So now what's next is just this big, large-scale investigation into what happened and what went wrong.
And that investigation will no doubt involve a lot of people at the very top of our government. I know that Speaker Mike Johnson has been briefed on it, saying that the FBI is going to be brought in and they will lead this investigation. All right, Janelle, thank you.
Thank you.
So, Jason, you and I have covered many events, many
Sure.
campaign rallies through the years. Many of us understand when you go into one of these events, you have to walk through a lot of security. But it sounds like in this case, this suspected shooter was outside of that perimeter. How do you think this changes everything? Do you think that Donald Trump can continue, as you and Matt Makoviak were talking about, to do these large rallies?
100% it changes everything from here forward. As Janelle was talking about with Mr. Schaefer there a moment ago, this was a catastrophic security failure. No doubt about it, because the ability for someone to take a shot at either a sitting president or a presidential candidate like this is stunning, to say the least. President Biden loves these outdoor rallies. He's had a number of them so far this year. He kicked off his campaign with an outdoor rally in McLennan County in Waco, which we covered as well. That was outside. There were a lot of airplane hangars around there, around the McLennan County airport. He's had them inside too. I think what you might see in the next 4 months is that the Secret Service says, listen, you can still have these rallies, but let's go inside where we can fully control everything. We know exactly who's in here, what they're doing here, and make sure that everyone is safe.
We also know that the tone of the campaigns might change a little. I know that would be hard for us to imagine because we are in such a divided time and campaign rhetoric is so heated. But we do know that President Biden has been working to pull down any attack ads and stop all of their outgoing communication. And that's a smart move right now.
100% is a smart move. It's the right thing to do. I think President Biden said the right things today when he addressed the nation. But it'll be interesting to see what the Republican National Convention looks like. Listen, every national convention is a time for the supporters, for the Democrats or for the Republicans to get up there to really talk about their candidate, why their plan is the best. We're hearing reporting from ABC over the last few hours here on Channel 8 where, President Biden and Republicans say, listen, we're going to have the RNC in Milwaukee and Trump's going to be there and we're going to campaign for him with a vengeance. What does that look like? Does everyone tone down the rhetoric? 4 months from the election, people are going to be getting pretty uptight on this.
Absolutely. Okay, well, we just got this word from authorities on the scene in Butler County, Pennsylvania. We are now expecting a briefing in about 15 minutes or so, around 10:45 our time. We are expecting a briefing on the ground there. We do believe that it won't just be Butler County officials, but also the Secret Service and the FBI taking part in that. So we'll monitor that. Again, that's expected at 10:45. We all know these briefings can slide. It can be delayed, but we will certainly monitor that for you. So this is, of course, a moment in American history. Sadly, it's not the first time someone has tried to take the life of either a sitting American president or a candidate for president. For us here in North Texas, of course, the incident that comes to mind is the assassination of John F. Kennedy, November 22nd, 1963. We all know he was president at the time when he was shot and killed in Dealey Plaza in downtown Dallas.
And you know, earlier tonight, Teresa, we sent a photographer a few blocks away here in downtown to Dealey Plaza, where the assassination happened some 61 years ago. Some people were there checking out the memorial and historical marker, as we see every night. No indication, though, that anyone was marking or even talking about what happened in Pennsylvania this evening.
Let's talk about history again. Democratic presidential candidate Robert F. Kennedy was shot and killed by an assassin on the campaign trail in 1968. In 1972, another Democrat running for president, George Wallace, was shot. He survived, but he was paralyzed, and that ended his campaign. And then a gunman also opened fire and injured President Ronald Reagan and his press secretary in 1981. So there's a lot of people who are maybe watching this who have no memory of anything happening like this, because 1981 was, you know, several decades ago. There are some of us who do have a memory of that happening, but I think it's important to realize that it is a moment in American history that some people have never witnessed before. And of course, we have no confirmation on motive tonight, but we have had decades of political rhetoric just continuing to get more heated and more heated and more heated. And you know that is going to be a major part of this investigation.
And the motive, Teresa, as you said, that's going to be the big question here. Who was this individual? Was it someone on the right, someone on the left? And why did they decide to do this? The fact that someone was able to get on top of a roof, the way it appears now, so close to the venue without anyone seeing it. You know, just because the magnetometers are there that these supporters go through at any rally, you and I have seen there are Secret Service snipers all around the perimeter that most people don't even see. And that's what's remarkable about that something like this could happen. Think about what happened to Gabby Giffords in 2011. That's been 13 years ago. And that seemed to be kind of a turning point for a lot of people. It didn't last. Will this one?
Yeah, she actually on social media tonight, she posted something that said that political violence is simply un-American.
Yeah, indeed so. There's no doubt about that. President Biden echoed that as well. With a close election like we're facing right now, 4 months away from November, we have two big political conventions, and then we have this horrific act that happened tonight. Does it really change things? How long does it last? That's the thing to watch.
I think it does change things. We'll just have to see what things it changes, right? Does it change the way that we talk to each other and the way that we treat each other when it comes to politics? And I'm not so sure about that.
And the things we say about each other.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, we are going to take one quick break, regroup, have more on the attack on former President Donald Trump when we come back. Again, we are awaiting a potential briefing from authorities there in Pennsylvania around 10:45 our time. Stay with us.
Hey, welcome back, everybody. I'm meteorologist Jesse Hawila. We want to give you a weather update here. For the rest of this weekend, we're dry. We had a couple of little showers and thunderstorms south of I-20 today. The rest of the weekend is dry. As we get into the work week, we do have a pattern change on the way, but it'll take until the end of the week to get here. So we are expecting to heat up back to the triple digits by the beginning of the work week. By the end of the work week, you start to see a cold front seep into Oklahoma. This is Wednesday morning at 7 a.m. from the Panhandle into Oklahoma. Most of North Texas stays dry Wednesday. On Thursday, we'll have scattered showers and thunderstorms move back into the picture. So scattered showers, storms starting Thursday morning, Thursday afternoon. Right now, we're not expecting severe weather, but it is a good chance for some showers and storms in the area. Thursday night, Friday, we'll have another chance for some scattered rain and thunderstorms as the front kind of stalls out to our south. Now, with that front stalling to the south, that's actually going to allow us to be a little bit cooler than normal for this time of the year. Now, remember, though, the normal this time of the year is very hot. You know, the normal is 96, so if we're cooler than normal by 5 degrees, it's still very warm outside, so you don't have highs in the lower 90s rather than the middle and upper 90s. But with this first round here, that first front, we're looking at maybe 1/10 to 1/4 of an inch of rain for most. Not a lot across the area. That's going to be mainly Wednesday through Friday of next week. The higher totals are going to be far to the south of the Dallas-Fort Worth area. Rain coverage-wise, Sunday, again, 10% southeast of the Metroplex. Monday and Tuesday are dry. That cold front gets in here late Wednesday into Thursday, 40% coverage Thursday. Friday, 20%. Saturday will be dry, but then beyond that, we actually may have another cold front that brings better rain chances that following week. I'll show you that in a second. So take a look. We're back in the upper 90s tomorrow, Monday. Tuesday, we're in 100. Wednesday, we're at 101. Cold front comes in. That'll knock us down to tolerable temps for this time of the year. The normal high, 96, will be below it, that's for sure, but not a lot. 91 to 93, which again, for this time of the year, is actually pretty good. Tonight, we'll have mostly clear skies. It's dry, it's warm, it's breezy. 77 tonight, south winds 10 to 20. Tomorrow, mostly sunny. It's going to be a little bit hotter than today. Today was 95. Tomorrow we'll go 98 with the higher humidity too. It's going to feel as hot as 107 when you factor that in. So you take a look at the 14-day. We're back to the triple digits Tuesday and Wednesday. Thursday, there's that good chance of rain when that cold front comes in. 91. I know, saying cold front this time of the year sounds odd, but by nature, it's a cold front. 92 Friday, Saturday, 93. We may have a brief spike in the temps again going into that next Sunday and Monday, middle and upper 90s. Then a lot of data starts to point toward an unsettled weather pattern. And by that, I don't mean, severe weather or anything like that. But for July standards, that's pretty impressive here in North Texas. We are entering some of our driest and hottest weeks that we see on average in a year. So to see daily chances for scattered showers and thunderstorms and highs that'll actually be fairly below normal, 90 to 92 here in North Texas, is seriously not that bad for the end of July. So we'll continue to watch that and, of course, bring you the latest. But right now, it does look like this summer so far continues to be fairly smooth compared to the last two. Teresa, Jason?
All right, Jesse, thank you so much. This is just coming into us from ABC News. They are reporting that former President Donald Trump has left the Butler, Pennsylvania area. That happened about 10 o'clock our time or so. That is according to the Pennsylvania governor. So ABC News now reporting that Donald Trump has left the Butler, Pennsylvania area. That's certainly good news that he's not having to stay at a hospital for hours on end. I
was about to say, it's certainly good news for that sense alone. He is well enough to get on a plane and go to his next stop, whether that's home, back to Mar-a-Lago, or where it might be. More news in just a moment.
I am, yes. Hi, Wolf. I'm here with Joseph Mine. He was sitting actually behind Donald Trump in the bleachers today when this all unfolded. I'm going to let him share exactly what he saw. It was a very harrowing moment that he was there for. Can you please tell us what happened, Joseph?
Yeah, it was the Trump. I was attending the rally. It seemed initially like firecrackers went off. It was very confusing initially because I knew it was gunfire, but I couldn't quite tell where it was coming from. It sounded like it was coming from behind the bleachers, and the man in the bleachers, kind of to the right of me in the bleachers, took a gunshot wound to the head. Was killed, and another woman. I don't know exactly where she was in the bleachers. I think she was either behind me or to the right of me. She got around she got hit in the forearm and hand. It looked like, but if she was wounded, she wasn't killed.
Can I ask you how you're feeling? Obviously, you just witnessed something terrible happen. a lot of chaos was in the room. How exactly are you feeling right now, Joseph?
You know, it's something you don't expect. You know, it's a bolt out of the blue, so it's very shocking. It's just, I think a lot of people in the crowd just thought it was fireworks going off. I knew immediately it was gunshots. I knew they were close, and then when I saw someone get hit and go down, that's when I knew it was probably serious. You know, it was a lot of confusion. It's just massive confusion, you know, throughout the event. I saw Donald Trump get hit. It looked like he was either, I was running my camera at the time, but it looked like he was just turning his head to the side, and it looked like he got grazed in the right ear with a bullet. I kind of saw that go on, and then I looked down, I saw that the man, you know, had died in the bleachers. It was just complete pandemonium. Like there was a bit of a delay, like there was a lot of confusion, but immediately, you know, it seemed like more gunfire erupted. I couldn't figure out where that was coming from, and then, you know, there was a state policeman there. I believe a SWAT team, you know, showed up relatively quickly. They jumped the side. There was a fence, you know, was next to the bleachers. They jumped the bleachers and started clearing the bleachers. And then I helped carry the body of the man down out of the bleachers, and they took him to a tent behind the bleachers. We put a towel over his head, but he is deceased.
You were telling me before when we were chatting briefly that you never had a chance to make it to a Trump rally, that this was your first time. Yes. Would you feel safe coming back to another Trump rally?
Yeah, you know, it's a very random event that happens. You know, I feel safe generally where I go in the country. You know, I think the problem is we have everyone seems very angry.
In Pennsylvania that injured former President Donald Trump. We want to recap what we know at this hour. It happened during a campaign rally in Butler, Pennsylvania, around 5:15 Dallas time. The former president says he was shot in his ear. You can see blood on his face as the Secret Service surrounded him.
President Trump, the former President Trump, was taken to a hospital and says he is doing well, having just left Butler County, Pennsylvania within the last 20 to 30 minutes or so. One person at the rally was killed, though, by that gunman, it appears. 2 other people critically injured tonight. The shooter was killed by Secret Service. Law enforcement sources told ABC News the shooter was positioned on the roof of a building just outside of the security perimeter, outside of that area where the presidential rally was tonight. President Biden spoke earlier calling the shooting, quote, sick, and says that violence, political violence, has no place in America.
Of course, we are continuing to learn new information by the hour. We will follow any new reaction and the latest developments overnight. ABC News is going to take it from here. Again, we are expecting a briefing at some point in the hours ahead from Butler County, Pennsylvania authorities, the FBI, and the Secret Service. So stick with ABC and make sure you tune in to WFAA Daybreak at 8 a.m. and Inside Texas Politics at 9 a.m.
We'll see you then.
The campaign, or at least, you know, some of the ads and some of the rhetoric. These are still 2 men who are trying to win an election. And this is a very important moment, not only for the former president, but for President Biden, who's been under extreme pressure from his left flank about whether or not he's going to stay in this race.
Yeah, and this comes at a very odd and tenuous time for President Biden, where he has been challenged by people in his own party about his ability to do the job, people questioning whether he's in charge, whether he has the mental ability to continue. The polls have shown that so many Americans have those kind of doubts, those kind of questions. And now comes this moment, the challenge, to Mary's point, where he's got to be a president first and a candidate second. I can tell you from based on the conversations I've had already here, Donald Trump does not intend to let up in any way, shape, or form around his campaign. The fact that this convention is going on as scheduled, the messaging is going to change, and I think to reflect this reality. The imagery that we saw, the still photos of him with blood literally on his face and on his hands, those are things that we are going to see a lot here in Milwaukee in the coming days. However, President Biden hopes to or plans to use his campaign. He is not going to have another side that lets up in any way. And in fact, there are a number of individuals, including some people that Donald Trump is still considering considering to be his vice president, who are directly blaming, without any evidence, that Joe Biden for this incident, without knowing anything about the shooter, without knowing anything about the motivation, saying that the way that he has built up the stakes for democracy has put this literally, there's some saying that he has blood on his hands. Again, that's an irresponsible statement based on what we know right now. There's no evidence to support that. But the rhetoric that led up to this moment in some ways, or that make this moment so obviously a sad and horrific one for the nation, is not ending with this incident pretty clearly. And I think in some ways we can see it boil over even more in the days ahead here in Milwaukee.
Exactly, and that's the concern from authorities, that you can throw fuel on the fire and only fan the flames with some of the language that's being used, and that's something that they're monitoring very closely. Rick Klein, thank you so much from Milwaukee. We also have on the phone with us Reince Priebus, former RNC chair, former chief of staff early on in the Trump administration. Reince, you're there in Milwaukee. What's the mood right now among Republicans?
Well, I'm also chair of the Milwaukee Host Committee, which raises the money, and I lead the community group here that helps put on the convention. And obviously people are stunned and saddened, and, you know, it's horrific and dreadful and all the other emotions that everyone has, which, you know, is a whirlwind of concern, but I will say that right now things are moving forward as planned, and you know, just being a person that's been around President Trump a lot, and I still am, I would suspect that you know, the president's going to be even stronger moving forward in both attitude and probably tone. And so I don't expect right now anything to change moving forward.
I want to follow up on that because obviously, you know, people have been thinking about the former president, and we know that he is doing fine. He suffered that minor injury to his right ear, and he says what he believed was a bullet that whizzed by. Somebody died today, at least one person, you know, an innocent bystander who was just there for this political event. And it's a reminder that you can't protect every location 100% all the way. And, you know, law enforcement often talks about soft targets and large crowds and gatherings. And it's one thing to say that the convention itself will be safe. But Reince, I guess my question is to you, like, how can you guarantee the safety and protection of the other people who are there participating, engaging in some of the other events around the convention?
Well, that's a good point. And obviously everyone involved is doing, you know, doubling and tripling down on conversations and reviews. Speak with the mayor tonight, folks at the RNC, and others, that everything is safe as humanly possible. But, you know, we have to do everything we can to make that happen. And we have to decide, I guess, as Americans and people that are here in Milwaukee, what's best for this convention. And right now, you know, the event is moving forward as planned. So obviously no one's going to want to do anything that will put anyone at risk. That's not something that we're willing to do. But also we have professional people here. We have over 4,000 police from outside of Wisconsin, not to mention the folks in Wisconsin, not to mention the Secret Service and others. So it goes without saying. I mean, safety is number one. We want people to have a good time. We want people to be safe. But we also don't want to be deterred by, you know, maniacs either. So all of it has to be analyzed, and that's what we're doing right now.
That's a really good point, Reince, because one thing we know about terrorists, whether domestic or, you know, from another country, is they attempt to change our way of life. And that's something that I would imagine that many on all sides of the aisle could agree that we don't want to let somebody change our way of life. But at the same time, major questions about security at these big events going forward. Reince Priebus for us tonight. Thank you so much for your time and your perspective. We appreciate it. Let's go back to Martha Raddatz in Washington. Martha, you've been talking to a number of people, and a reminder to our viewers, we are waiting for this police press conference to hopefully give us some more information about what happened. But Martha, you've also been seeing some of those aerial images and the lay of the land, so to speak, at this event as you've been getting information about what happened with the shooter.
Well, the shooter was on a roof, and that is going to be the biggest question. How did he get on that roof? How long did it take him to get up on that roof? Was he on a ladder on the side? And we see between those buildings, did a shooter go up that way? And how did they not notice him for such a time period? I mean, he would have had to set up on that roof at some point. And who saw him? Did people realize he was up there? We've seen this sniper. We've seen the U.S. Secret Service counter sniper team in some of that video at the venue itself and looking around to that outer perimeter. I spoke to a former agent earlier this evening, was in touch with a former agent earlier this evening. I think we're going to stop right now.
Martha, yeah,
and go to
forgive
you.
me. The press conference is underway. Let's listen. And we're just watching this right now. We understand.
Is everyone ready?
Law enforcement getting set up, ready to deliver some remarks.
All right. So my name is Kevin Rojek. That's R-O-J-E-K. I'm the special agent in charge of the FBI Pittsburgh field office. The first thing I want to say is that the FBI stands with the people of Butler County in Western Pennsylvania, and our hearts go out to the victims of this heinous act which occurred today. This is our community, and I want to let the public know that the FBI has deployed a number of our resources, including investigative agents, our evidence response team, bomb technicians, and we have additional resources coming from other field offices, as well as from FBI headquarters, including our evidence response from Quantico, Virginia. We have intelligence analysts as well, working from our field office in Pittsburgh, working feverishly to attempt to identify the individual who did this and any motives behind why this was done. Right now, we need the public's help. Anyone who was on scene, who saw anything, who identified any information, please report that to the FBI using either the phone number 1-800-CALL-FBI or online at fbi.gov/Butler. This evening we had what we're calling an assassination attempt against our former president, Donald Trump. It's still an active crime scene. As I mentioned, we have a number of agents on scene. We also are working closely with other federal agencies, our state partners, and our local police partners as well. Again, at this time, we are not prepared to identify who the shooter is. We are close to that identification, and as soon as we are 100% confident in who that individual is, we will share it with the press. With that being said, also, we do not currently have an identified motive, although our investigators are working tirelessly to attempt to identify what that motive was. At this time, I'm going to turn over the podium to Colonel Chris Paris from the Pennsylvania State Police.
Thank you very much. My name is Colonel Chris Paris, P-A-R-I-S, Commissioner of Pennsylvania State Police. I would just like to say that the State Police have been in regular contact with the Governor's Office, and the full support and assets of the entire agency are behind the FBI and our other federal and municipal partners to assist with this investigation. The thoughts and prayers of the Pennsylvania State Police are likewise with the victims of this terrible act. We are prepared to support this investigation in any way, shape, or form, and we stand ready to participate in a full, fair, and competent and thorough investigation. To give you an operational rundown, Deputy Commissioner of Operations, Lieutenant Colonel George Bivens, is behind me, and he will discuss the operational portion that's being conducted by the Pennsylvania State Police. Lieutenant Colonel Bivens.
Good evening. So let me describe for you a little bit about the scene that we have over there. As you know, there was a grandstand, a very large area, a lot of people there when this all unfolded. The former president had come out and begun to speak shortly after 6 o'clock this evening. And within about 10 to 15 minutes, a number of sounds were heard, and it became apparent that shots were being fired in that direction. It was a chaotic scene. Law enforcement, I believe, acted heroically, quickly identifying and neutralizing the threat, as well as responding to assist the various victims. PSP had a significant presence on the scene along with all of our federal partners at the time of the shooting. We have since enhanced that presence significantly, bringing in resources from all over the Commonwealth to ensure that we have a speedy, thorough investigation. We are working very closely with the FBI as we work through this. As you can imagine, because of the variety of crimes that have been committed, some are under federal jurisdiction, some are under state jurisdiction. And so, we're working through all of that, not an issue at all. We work seamlessly. But the FBI has maintained the lead on the attempted assassination. PSP will take the lead on the homicide and the shootings of the other individuals in the grandstand area. And so there are a lot of witnesses to be interviewed, a lot of things to be processed. There were some complicators that hopefully the next time we speak we can describe for you, but some complicators that slowed down some of the processing and the positive identification of the shooter. But know that at this time we have no reason to believe that there is any other existing threat out there. We are doing everything we can to make sure that this is thoroughly investigated, and that if there is any information developed that anyone else was involved, that between PSP and the FBI, that will very quickly be followed up on. So I think at this time we would open it up to questions from all of you.
Was this a lone wolf attack?
Again, I think it's too early to say that. We have one shooter tentatively identified, but we're not stopping there. We're following up on a lot of information. It will be some time until we can conclusively say or answer that question, I think.
How long do you think that gun was hiding up there? I mean, we saw the snipers up there, as the crowds were kind of mulling in and looked like they had a pretty good viewpoint to check everyone out. So how long did that guy been out there?
Again, that will all be part of the investigation, but
Come up to the mic.
that will all be part of the investigation. But I can tell you that preliminarily it appears everything unfolded very quickly. So, again, we'll have more information on that, but it's just too early to start definitively saying this happened at this exact time.
Inside the security perimeter, right? That building was outside of the
That's correct.
How far outside of it?
We'll have that information for you. It was some distance outside of the
Colonel, can you comment on reports that there were people who saw someone on the roof and tried to alert authorities?
We're following up on those. I will tell you that I am aware of those, and I am aware that law enforcement had responded to a number of reports of suspicious activity. The specific response to this will be all part of the after action, but yes, law enforcement was responding to check on several suspicious occurrences.
What were the other suspicious occurrences?
That'll all be part of the investigation.
I think I'd like to.
Butler County, Pennsylvania. Is there anything else? Did he have any affiliation with that company, do you know?
So again, we're not prepared at this time to provide the identity.
Forgive us here. We are having a couple hits to the signal here with this press conference that's happening right now in Pennsylvania. Let's see if it comes back. If it doesn't, we'll continue here, or as we wait for it, I can give you some of the headlines from what law enforcement officers were talking about. This is a multi-agency effort, very complex, between the FBI, which is leading the investigation, and the Pennsylvania State Police. And they said that because of the different layers, they said at this time there are a variety of different crimes, some under federal jurisdiction, some under state jurisdiction, but they will be working together. They also said at this time they're not prepared to identify the shooter. They're close to identification, but they want to make sure they're 100% confident in who that person is before they share it. This is key. They also said there is no reason to believe that there is any other existing threat out there. Now, they wouldn't say specifically if they thought this was the act of a lone wolf, pointing out that they're not sure of the motive in this case. But at this point, this is significant, especially for the area. No reason to believe that there's any other existing threat out there. Now, one part of the question and answer I thought was interesting. There were reports that police confirmed of someone on a rooftop. And so let's go ahead and listen into the presser.
So I think the credit goes to not only the Secret Service who was on site, but also the state and local partners who were there on site and were able to react immediately when the incident occurred.
Do you know how many officers fired their weapons?
I do not.
I understand that it's very early and there's still going to be a lot of questions, but I mean...
At this point, we're not going to make that assessment. There's an active investigation. A lot of things need to occur investigatively to make those determinations of what, if any, failures there were. So really, we can't comment on that at this time.
So you can't say if Secret Service had checked those buildings or we're keeping a close eye or...
Really have to defer to Secret Service for those questions.
Was there any law enforcement at the AGR property prior to the event? Were there police at that location at any point during the event?
Are you saying the location where the shooter was located?
Yes.
I don't have any information on that. You'd have to defer to Secret Service.
When do you think you will release, when will the name of the shooter be released? I mean, any inkling of when that might happen, tomorrow or?
So that'll be, as soon as we've confirmed 100%, we're willing to release that. So if we have, as far as the contact information for the press, we should be able to do that within the next few hours, I imagine.
There was a vehicle being checked not far from here. We've also heard of a possible related scene in Bethel Park. Is there anything you can tell us tonight about other areas where law enforcement may be searching in relation to this?
Again, right now we're tracking down all leads and doing all interviews and tracking anything that we can regarding suspicious locations, vehicles, locations, interviewing individuals. So it's all related to this event, but I can't confirm or deny anything that's going on beyond that.
Can you tell us about the weapon that the shooter used?
Details of the weapon?
Yeah, what kind of rifle was it?
Do you want to comment on that?
What did he use?
Okay, until we have the confirmation of who the shooter is.
Our viewers there, just again, we've had some issues with the signal here at the press conference. It is ongoing. Let's see if we can listen in.
Or do you have reason to believe that there are bombs somewhere in Butler County? Can you just walk us through that?
It's primarily standard procedure of any suspicious packages. In this case, there was identification of suspicious packages around where the shooter was, and so we deployed, in an abundance of caution, bomb assets to make sure that those were cleared for investigators to move safely in the area. We're still working on, it's still an active crime scene, so I'm not going to say that the scene is 100% clear at this time.
Why are there any Secret Service agents here right now for the press conference?
So Secret Service wasn't available for the press conference at this time.
I understand what packages are you talking about? You're talking about packages, but the suspicious packages like what? You're the shooter.
Really anything. I don't have specifics on what they were looking at, but there's people in the crowd will leave bags as they're fleeing the scene like this. So any suspicious packages we have to treat as it may be an explosive device.
And how quickly, I guess the Secret Service, we're not here to talk about, I guess, but when you guys jumped into action, all law enforcement and were able to take down that shooter, how quickly did everybody jump in and who ended up taking him out?
So it was immediate, and we're still trying to figure that out. So we'll wait till we have more definitive information regarding that investigatively.
What about the person in the crowd? Do you have any information about how they were killed?
My understanding was it was from the shooter, but again, those will be details that are released later.
Do you search homes or apartments as a part of your method of identifying the individual?
So if that's where the leads take us, absolutely.
Was Donald Trump hit with a bullet, do you know for sure, or was it potentially something else that could?
I don't have that specific information as far as the injuries to the former president.
I understand you're not releasing the suspect's identification right now, but as you know it, is this person known to you guys? Is he somebody that you guys have been looking at due to threats he's possibly made online, et cetera, et cetera?
Again, the information that we currently have, we're looking at that obviously very intently, and as we know that information, we'll release that as well. So we'll need to plan another time for a follow-up press conference. We're looking at all investigative leads and all everything from, and that's why we asked the public, because I'm sure there'll be cell phone video, there'll be all kinds of information that we'll use to fully flesh out exactly what happened here.
I think you're saying you can't say what type of gun it is, but do you know how many shots were fired?
I don't.
And
I don't have that information as far as that'll come out in the investigation as well.
Is there an identification tonight on the other victims?
As far as the civilians,
civilians that were injured and killed.
Yeah.
So we do have identification on those. We're not prepared to release it at this time. We have notified a number of family members, but they have not had an opportunity to notify extended family and things. I would confirm for you that we did have one individual killed, and I know I heard somebody say about 2 victims. There were 3 in total besides the former president. So 2 critically wounded, 1 killed.
At this point, do you know if they were sitting near each other and where in relation to the former president were they?
I don't have their exact seating by individual. Again, that'll all be part of the investigation, but their shots were scattered somewhat, and so they weren't just into one particular location.
you're saying just one fatality as of right now?
Yes.
The shooter and 1 fatality.
The shooter plus 1 fatality.
Oh, thank you.
So there was 1 victim of the shooter who was killed, and then the shooter was killed.
And then 2 incredible.
Yes, ma'am.
Witnesses say they saw a semi-automatic rifle used by the shooter. Can you share any more details of it? That's what
I've heard those reports as well, and again, we do have a good idea of what the weapon was, but again, that's all part of the ongoing investigation. And I'm not trying to be cagey about that. When the SAC talked about the need to be very methodical and to be cautious with that scene, we are doing just that. We don't want anybody else getting hurt, and candidly, there are some concerns that we'll be able to talk more about later on about just what those concerns are and continue to be.
Have you talked to the shooter's family yet?
That's all part of the investigation.
After the event, there were a lot of really angry people. Are you monitoring? Have there been any threats in response to this? Are you worried? Have there been any specific threats?
That's certainly a concern, and we're monitoring that whole situation. I mentioned that we're bringing a lot of assets to bear, and so like the FBI utilizing their analysts, we also have the Pennsylvania Criminal Intelligence Center. We will utilize the resources of our intelligence division and the Criminal Intelligence Center to be able to monitor for concerns about any threats, regardless of the side of the issue or the political spectrum. We want to make sure that we try and avoid any further violence.
So no, nothing specific so far?
No, sir.
Without identifying them by name, can you say anything about the other folks who were injured or killed? Were they adults, men, male, female, anything at all?
They were adults, and they're male.
All 3?
Yes.
How difficult it is for your department, though, or all your departments, to go talk to these family members, including the civilians who were gunned down while they just went to a rally to try and, celebrate, I guess, the upcoming election? What are those conversations like, and how do you kind of get through that?
We have trained investigators, and we're partnered hand in hand with the FBI, again, because we've got some federal violations, some state violations. And so our investigators are going out methodically. We have a large team of investigators that are going out, dividing up these interviews and trying to conduct them as quickly as possible. And then there will be follow-ups. You know, with the FBI asking for people to call in tips, I have no doubt that we will receive a lot of additional information that will also require follow-up. But again, we're working very well together, and it's only a short matter of time until we get through all of those interviews.
From your experience, how close a call was it for President Trump?
There were no police hit with bullets.
From your experience, how close a call was it for President Trump?
I'm not going to speculate or comment on that.
Have any of you?
And as we're listening to this press conference in Pennsylvania, you're looking at a live picture right now. This is the plane of former President Donald Trump flying into Newark. We understand that the president is going to regroup with family, with advisors in New Jersey as they get ready for what is still set to go forward with the Republican National Convention in Milwaukee starting on Monday. So quite a day for the former president, what law enforcement, again, are describing as an attempted assassination on Donald Trump today. Trump himself saying that a bullet whizzed past his ear, his right ear, and actually clipped part of it. He was injured slightly, taken to a hospital for medical treatment, but has since been released, left the area, and the image of former President Trump's plane landing in New Jersey right now. Once again, this press conference is playing out in Pennsylvania. We're getting a few more details of what they're looking at. I believe they're still wrapping up right now. Let's go ahead and listen in.
Part of that process?
It's my understanding that was outside of the perimeter.
Did this shooter have any previous criminal history?
We're not going to comment on anything about the
Did any
shooter.
agency deny Trump's team extra security? Any of the agencies that are up there?
Not that I'm aware of.
If Trump had been the nominee already, would he have had additional security for this event?
There again, Secret Service has the lead, and I'm not going to comment or speculate on what may or may not be provided at any given point, depending on their status as a candidate. What I will tell you is that, in my experience, the Secret Service does an excellent job of maintaining security on protectees. They're very cautious. They don't hesitate to ask for resources, and candidly, we don't hesitate to supply those resources.
Colonel, you're asking for the public's help. Can you elaborate and be more specific about what you'd really like to see from the public? If it's videos, photos, personal accounts?
I think the videos and photos would be very helpful, and I think that once the shooter is identified, anyone that has specific information on that shooter, that would be very helpful as well to help us assess motive. And again, as I mentioned earlier, we are absolutely not taking for granted that this was a lone wolf attack, and so we would be looking for any additional information that might point us toward anybody else that may have had a hand in this.
Sir, at this point, what is the main focus of the investigation? What's the most important thing for you right now, a few hours?
Well, there's not any one single focus. I mean, certainly the immediate focus was life safety, getting the former president out of there, and to care, getting care to the other victims, and trying to secure the scene as quickly as possible. It shifted then from a life safety priority to then an investigative priority. And so I guess if I had to point to where we are right now, the single greatest priority would be to identifying a motive and whether there was anyone else involved.
We're just beginning the political season. Are you guys concerned with all of these rallies that happen and how they're set up? Is this going to change maybe the venues?
Again, I would refer you to the Secret Service in terms of what they work out with the campaigns. We will continue to supply resources, as I'm sure the FBI will, and local partners as well.
And again, you're listening to this press conference with law enforcement in Pennsylvania, the state police, and the FBI speaking. But the image to the right of your screen is President Biden stepping off of Air Force One, arriving at, I believe it's at Andrews Air Force Base. at Andrews. This was just moments ago. We know that President Biden ended his trip. He was in Rehoboth, Delaware for the weekend. He ended his trip early to come back to Washington as all of this started playing out. I was just listening to see if we're going to go ahead and we're going to leave this press conference right now and go to Mary Bruce, our chief White House correspondent. Mary, a couple things that I just wanted to point out before we come to you as we're getting all of this information here. Once again, law enforcement saying that they are calling this an attempted assassination of former President Trump. I remember earlier tonight when President Biden was asked that question, he wasn't ready to go and confirm that, but now we're officially hearing it from officials. And once again, before I come to you, forgive me, I just want to point out, too, that they mentioned that one victim was killed, 2 critically wounded. All are adult males, and that the shots were scattered somewhat, so they couldn't identify specifically where these victims were in the crowd. But they are also highlighting the fact they do not believe that there is any other existing threat out there. They couldn't confirm whether this is a lone wolf or what the motive was or if others were involved in some way. But at this point, they do not believe there's another threat out there. Mary Bruce, I would imagine the White House, President Biden's team will be on heightened alert, regardless of what law enforcement says tonight.
Of course, I think that is natural to assume here. And the president, of course, has also been briefed on all of this. And as you noted, he did say earlier today that he had an opinion when asked if this was an assassination attempt. But at the time, he noted that he didn't have enough of the facts. Well, now, of course, they clearly have been able to ascertain that, yes, this was, in fact, an assassination attempt. The president, as you noted, is now back in Washington. He'll be back here at the White House shortly. His motorcade now making its way from Andrews Air Force Base back here to the White House so the president can continue to monitor all of the developments as they continue to try and answer all of those remaining questions here. The president will, as we have been saying, get another briefing tomorrow morning. He'll be meeting with his Homeland Security team and law enforcement officials as they continue to try and unpack all of this. The public message from the president so far has been that this is a time for unity, saying that there's no place in America for this kind of violence. He has called this sick. He has said we cannot be like this. We cannot allow for this to happen. That is the message coming from the president. And I suspect that will continue to be the message in the coming days. The message coming from Joe Biden, the candidate, has been that they are pausing all of their public communications, as we've been saying. They're pulling down all of their ads, trying to make the point that this is not a time for politics. Of course, we have seen a bit of a different message coming out of the Trump campaign. They have been leaning into this moment. We noted that they put out that fundraising appeal off of this, saying, the Trump team saying, I will never surrender. They're not after me. They're after you. I'm just standing in the way. All of this, of course, coming as we head into that critical next week at the RNC.
Yeah, we're seeing the politics, we're seeing the campaign, we're also seeing law enforcement start the process of carrying out this investigation, just the beginning stages. Mary Bruce, thank you. I believe that we're going to go back. We just lost the signal to the presser, but just a couple of other things that I just wanted to highlight, because some things that we hadn't heard before. They did say that there were a number of reports that they heard from people, and the state police did confirm that they heard that people were trying to report suspicious activity prior to those shots being fired, and that there were reports of someone on a rooftop somewhere. Now, state police couldn't elaborate on exactly what those reports were, but they did say that that was something that they were looking into with this investigation. Let's go ahead and listen back in to that presser in progress.
What the request is from the Secret Service. Just in their defense, what I would want to say is it is incredibly difficult to have a venue open to the public and to secure that against any possible threat, against a very determined attacker. That's a huge lift to try and do it. And, the investigation will really give us an opportunity to take a look at where any failures occurred and what can be done better in the future.
Lieutenant Colonel Bivens, do you know when another briefing might be held?
We don't have one scheduled, but I would tell you we will let you know and give you plenty of notice. Certainly, as soon as additional things develop that would be noteworthy or of interest to you, we'll get that scheduled and have another with you.
Locally, what can residents, businesses expect to happen with the investigation over the next couple of days? What's going to be going on there that people
Well, again, the interviews will all be occurring, and so they may see law enforcement in their communities. People came from a wide area to come to this rally, I'm told. So, there's going to be law enforcement fanning out, and as additional calls, photos, videos come in, those additional interviews will result in law enforcement being out in the community conducting those interviews. But otherwise, they really shouldn't see any other significant impact in the community.
Would you confirm whether it's a male or female, the homicide, the bystander who died?
It's a male.
A male?
Yes.
Now, I'm from a European outlet from Poland, and I'm already getting text messages from back home, and people are asking, how could this happen? What's going on in America? I know that it's a philosophical question, but how could you talk to the people outside the United States about what happened here in Buffalo?
Well, again, what I would say is a tragic incident that occurred. We're not in a position to start second guessing how or why or anything else at this point. Just know that it will be thoroughly investigated. If there is anyone to prosecute, that will be done, and we'll move forward. But I don't have a good answer for you.
We'll just take one last question.
I know that PSP said that you guys were not aware of any additional requests from the Trump team for security. What about the FBI? Was there an additional request for additional security from the Trump team, and was that denied in any way, shape, or form?
No, there was no additional request for security that was ever denied by the FBI.
What does the FBI do in these events? Like, what is your rule?
So we showed up after the fact. We were monitoring the event, but it was once the incident occurred that we come and we take the primary jurisdiction for the investigation. Thank you. We'll, as we have additional information, we'll provide it. Thank you.
And once again, law enforcement wrapping up this press conference. This is in Pennsylvania. It was a joint presser. The Pennsylvania State Police, also the FBI, talking about the teamwork that they'll be working together as they pursue this going forward. There was one more note that I wanted to bring to your attention that we heard. They said that, and you see it written at the bottom of your screen there, that it's still an active crime scene there at the location in Butler, Pennsylvania, where the rally occurred and where the shooting played out. They also said that there were some suspicious packages in the area where the shooter was. Remember, the shooter was shot and killed by a counter sniper with the Secret Service. They said that there were some suspicious packages, so they deployed some resources to clear that area. That's not to say that there was any sort of device that was dangerous, but out of an abundance of caution, this is the sort of thing that they have to do to clear this massive area, this massive crime scene. And you're looking at some of the aerial pictures right here. Let's go back to our team now, because Pierre Thomas has been getting a lot of information from law enforcement side. And Pierre, the one thing that we were talking about earlier that we didn't hear is they said that they're not prepared at this time to identify the shooter. They said they're close to identification, but they want to be 100% confident in who that person is.
Well, they absolutely have a name that they're working with. And right now, our guidance is that there are residents and other locations that are being checked in connection with this suspect. And again, the reason why they're being so careful is that any place that they're going to, they don't want anyone who may have been involved to know that they're coming. So that's why they're being very coy about releasing the name at this point. But to be clear, they have a name. They're working off it. They're very certain that they know who did this. The key now is to do this investigation to the point where they're comfortable enough to release the name to the public where they can get additional help. A massive amount of resources is being applied to this. The FBI has behavioral scientists who are going to help with this in terms of understanding the motive in connection with this case. They have an evidence response team that is being brought from Quantico. That is, according to my source, the best they have in terms of going over every scintilla of evidence and cataloging it. There will be a system in place for taking in the hundreds or more tips that will come in connection with this that will all be computerized. The FBI, as one source told me a few moments ago, actually an hour or so ago, this is what we do. We have the capacity to vacuum clean every bit of information so that we can reconstruct everything there is to know about this man identified as a male suspect. We're told young person. We will get additional information about his identity, but the game plan now is to reconstruct his life and to know everything possible to understand why this took place.
And to a reminder to our viewers here, Pierre, because as you were speaking, we were showing an image that was a photograph that we were told is being looked at by authorities, a photograph, what they believe is the shooter on a rooftop.
Absolutely. And if you look at the garb, it appears to be military style. I'm not quite certain here. They are looking at that. Could that have caused some confusion as to why this person might have been proceeding to the roof? Because, again, the law enforcement presence at these kind of events is significant. And there might have been some confusion as to whether this person might have been law enforcement. But they pointed out that there was some suspicious activity that was noticed that was being conveyed to law enforcement. And with the other thing I can tell you, these packages that they're talking about, there are always concerns about potential booby traps in a situation like this. And so there are just layers upon layers of investigation that are now taking place and that will happen throughout the night.
Yep, and especially when they don't have a motive and they don't know what this person was intending to do beyond what happened with that shooting. Pierre, thank you. Let's go back to Aaron Katursky because as we're getting more information about this shooter, you're also learning how they ultimately identified him or a way that they were looking at identifying him.
And it hasn't been easy, Whit, because authorities say the shooter was carrying no identification on his person. So they've had to use DNA technology to identify him that way. That may be what's giving the FBI some pause in formally releasing the name so they can do that biometric identification. So that also tells you that perhaps this person didn't want to be identified. And what that means as far as motive, we're not sure. The authorities have not yet identified one. But with the name they do have, even though they're not releasing it to the public, and as they wait for biometric confirmation, they've already started carrying out law enforcement operations nearby in western Pennsylvania at locations that may be associated with this young man. They've undoubtedly tried to scour his social media, if there is any, talk to people who knew him, relatives, friends, because they do want to, as you heard the authorities say, understand a possible motive here with.
Aaron Katursky, thank you. And Brad Garrett, our law enforcement contributor. Brad, let's bring you in because you've been a part of so many major investigations. This is unique. We're talking about an attempted assassination of a former president who is currently a candidate for president again. And what's your takeaway in terms of the identifying of this shooter and what we know about him already?
So, the pause obviously is they do know who he is, but they probably don't know all the tentacles connected to him, if in fact there are any. And until you eliminate those you're going to walk very carefully, and you're not going to get the public involved with names until you do searches and that you have a really solid feeling that this is a lone actor, which is, it sounds like that's what they have, but they don't know that, I think, 100% yet. And so you'll see this probably, I suspect, by tomorrow. We'll know who the shooter is. You won't maybe know much about motive, if any, officially for a while. It'll also, this whole thing is a teaching moment for them because this guy had to be, again, me guessing, outside the perimeter of what they had covered. And only, I suspect, when he started shooting, that they were able to draw a beat on him and stop him. So this will go together, I think, pretty quickly. And we should have a lot more information, I think, by tomorrow.
And already in the past 5 hours or so, we have learned a lot. Brad Garrett, thank you. Let's bring in Elizabeth Newman, our contributor, our former Department of Homeland Security under former President Trump. Elizabeth, what are you learning, and what's your takeaway in this sense of the shooter profile that we're starting to get right now?
Look, we don't have a ton of data about assassination attempt attackers, in part because there just aren't that many assassination attempts. But we do have a lot of data about the type of attackers that carry out targeted attacks, targeted violence attacks. And things that we know is that there's usually leakage. They usually tell people or the people around them know that something is off, know that something has shifted. We know that many of them have some sort of life stressor in their life experience in the last year, some sort of crisis. Sometimes it's a job loss, sometimes it's a loss of a loved one. Many of them have mental health challenges, not necessarily a diagnosable illness, but just it can be a broad category of mental health challenges. And all of these things is what Brad was referencing earlier. They're going to be looking into the attacker's history here. There sometimes is an ideological motivation, and of course, because of who the target is, everybody's kind of jumping to, well, clearly this has a political motive. It might, but we also know that a lot of times, I mean, you can go back to Ronald Reagan's assassination attempt. That wasn't politically motive. It was somebody with a mental health fixation on a celebrity trying to show off for a celebrity. So we really don't know yet motive, but we do know probably that there was some sort of crisis in their life. They're disaffected. They probably spent tremendous time online. We know most people who carry out attacks now plan for them online. They watch videos, they get their tactics, and they get their inspiration from the online environment. So one of the things, this person is a lone attacker, it appears, but they're not a lone wolf. They have been participating in a milieu of violent rhetoric and violent inspiration probably for quite some time. At least that's the profile of most people who carry out attacks.
And that's a really great point. And again, we are learning more and more as the minutes and the hours go by, already into the evening. And the next 24 to 48 hours, it's likely to be very illuminating with more information. Elizabeth Newman, thank you so much. We cannot forget in all of this the people who were there, the witnesses and the victims. Authorities again confirming that one person was killed, 2 critically wounded, all adult males. We heard from so many witnesses who saw all of this. Some of them rushed in to try to help. We've been speaking with some who were at the Trump rally describing what they saw and heard. A warning, some of it is disturbing. Let's listen.
I was positioned probably about maybe 20 feet away from the president at the point in time when he was making his address. I was to the right of the stage due to me being I was a speaker at the event. So I did my speech earlier today during the pre-program, and I was a few feet from where this all occurred. We heard the shots, and I thought it was, first thought it was fireworks because, you know, people are on edge, and any kind of loud boom you hear, you're going to think gunshots immediately, especially because of the environment of what was going on. And I turned around, and someone yelled medic, and I looked, and there was no way a medic could have got to that person in time, so I left my seat, took my tie off, I jumped over the barrier, and I ran to the individual. But when I got there, it was too late. The person was bleeding out through their head. And like I said, once again, respects to the family because this is a very tough time. But they were shot, and I tried to, you know, block the wound. I held a towel against it. And until a medical team arrived and got him out, and you know, from there I helped the police and crowd control with getting people out of there because people were very nervous, people were very hesitant, and we had to move people fast and get them into a safe location, opposite of where the shooter was at or said to be at. So I assisted with getting people down and getting people out. And I try to keep kids calm and just get people clear.
Wow, Rico. Obviously, we want to be sensitive to the victim's family. But can you tell us more about this person? Where they were? Was it a man? Was it a woman?
Well, it was a male. It was a male victim. He was literally just sitting there in the stands. He had to be maybe 3 or 4 rows up from the bottom of the bleachers where everybody was sitting. And 1 second where everyone's cheering and happy and listening to what Trump's saying, and the next minute he's gone.
Rico, did you have any training in this sort of in this sort of like first aid? I mean, this is life-saving aid that you're describing here.
I mean, I'm in the military. I'm in the 171st Air Refueling Wing, and you know, we learn first aid and self-aid buddy care and basic training. And you know, at the point, as soon as I heard the shots and I seen and heard someone yell medic, my first instinct was, you know, I'm trained in self-aid. I'm trained in you know, applying a tourniquet, but I'm not trained to see someone's, you know, what I witnessed.
I mean, nobody can be trained for that, and we're getting the sense, Rico, not just from you, but from others. I think there's going to be some serious time, some healing that's going to need to take place for the people who were there and saw all of this, and especially for you to see everything up close. And you got the sense early on that that this person was lost?
From understanding head wounds and how they operate, when I seen what I seen, I was afraid that person was lost. And reading what has been done, said, and stated in the news so far, those are now facts, which is a shame.
Rico, I don't even know if these are the right words to ask this question, because most people have never been in this situation, but how are you processing what you saw and what you witnessed?
I mean, one can only process what happened, you know, hopefully as slow as possible. But my worry, my heart at this point in time is not for myself, but it's for the families of the loved one.
We just saw him, Trump duck behind the podium, and then a Secret Service pile on top of him, and we heard the shots.
More like what we heard, the bullets rattling around the grandstand. One hit the speaker tower, and then chaos broke. We hit the ground, and the police converged to the grandstands.
I watched him kind of graze his ear, and then I heard a pop, and he went down, and then I heard another pop, and then a Secret Service kind of came up to the stage. I mean, it was just a chaotic scene.
I could see his face. He was right there talking, having a good time. And, you know, you heard one shot, two shot. It sounded like, you know, bang, nothing crazy. And then you heard maybe 3 or 4 more, and that's when everyone got quiet, started panicking. Trump dropped right to the floor. I guess Secret Service jumped on top of him and shielded him. But, you know, as soon as everyone in the crowd figured out what was going on, we all ducked, and my buddies just jumped on top of me, piled on top of me. You know, and we had no idea what was going on. You know, you're in total shock. You're shook, and, you know, you can't feel your legs. But we were trying to decide if we wanted to get up and run, and we had really no idea what to do. And next thing you know, you see bullets, or you hear bullets flying, and I believe a bullet hit the hydraulic lift that was holding up the speakers, and that thing almost collapsed. There was hydraulic fluid and water spitting everywhere all over the crowd. And then before you know it, everyone just gets up and starts running. But
and
Trump
Stephen,
stand.
Oh, forgive me. I'm sorry. There's a little bit of a delay, but on that note about everybody getting up and running, we're actually showing video that you shot on your cell phone. And this is the moment with people running out of the venue. Describe what that was like, and when were you actually able to get out?
It was pretty stressful. You know, I'm looking around trying to make sure all my buddies who came with me were with me. And, you know, it took probably a good 10 minutes to get out of there, to get out of the whole area. And, you know, before you know it, there's ATVs and UTVs flying and ambulances and all that kind of stuff. And we're trying to figure out how to get out of there and get home. But you know, we made it. And when we walked out to the road, they had, you know, police blocking everything off, and we actually found out where the building was that the shooter was shooting from. They had it all taped off. I guess it was like an agricultural warehouse, something like that. So, you know, it was pretty scary. It's like you're in the movies.
Stephen, forgive me again. I'm sorry. There's a little bit of a delay with the connection, but did you say that you were able to see the building that the shooter was allegedly perched on top of here? You said it was taped off by law enforcement. What did it look like?
It was like kind of like an airplane hangar, maybe, like a warehouse for agricultural equipment, I guess. ARC, AGC, something like that on the side. But once we were out, maybe 30, 40 minutes after, they were taping it off, investigating it. They had the dogs going and all that stuff. There was traffic jams everywhere. It was kind of hard to.
How far away was that area from where the former president was standing?
Maybe 300, 400 yards, maybe less, honestly.
And Stephen, when you hear that people who were there in the crowd with you, other bystanders, at least one, maybe more, were killed, how does that make you feel?
Honestly, still kind of numb to it. It's hard to process all this. Your heart rate is through the roof, but best wishes for their family, and they were supporting the country that they love. And in the meantime, it's definitely sad, and it's heartbreaking, honestly.
And Stephen, we've been hearing from people on both sides of the aisle, Republicans, Democrats, independent candidate, RFK Jr., and all with the same sentiment, condemning political violence, saying there's no place in this country for something like this. And I just wonder, from your perspective too, you're out there, you're exercising your right to support a candidate. What message do you have for people out there? Because the country is at this political boiling point. There's so much division and anger and hatred right now from one side and the other. What would you like to tell people?
At the end of the day, whether you're on the left, the right, the center, or you don't believe in politics at all, we all still put our pants on in the morning. We all breathe the air and go to work, and a lot of these issues, in 10 years, no one even thinks about them or cares about them. So we're all people at the end of the day, and, it's not worth taking someone's life over political beliefs or whatever. It's just senseless.
Senseless indeed. All people at the end of the day, all Americans at the end of the day, trying to get through this tragedy. Let's get back to Mary Bruce at the White House, our chief White House correspondent. President Biden has arrived.
Yeah, just moments ago with the president now back at the White House, of course, cutting short what was his plan to spend the weekend at his beach house at Rehoboth Beach, Delaware. Instead, he is now back monitoring all of this as it is unfolding. He has been continuously being briefed and updated on all of these developments and will continue to be so tomorrow morning. As we've been saying, he'll be briefed by his Homeland Security team, law enforcement officials. The president, we know, has spoken to Donald Trump, though we don't know much about what that conversation entailed. Of course, the president, earlier in the day said that he was sending his prayers to the president and to the other victims of this horrific attack. The president was shouted at by reporters asking for how that conversation went. He did not want to engage the press, instead just ignoring them and walking up the stairs to Air Force One and back down. All of this has completely changed everything, about this race and this political moment. And the president, before you get to any of the politics, is simply going to have, a lot of the same questions that all of us have. And I do think it is interesting to remember that the president's events, the president's campaign events, they have a very similar security procedure, security process. So, there are a lot of questions that the president is going to have, as the president, as a candidate, about, how this could have happened and what lessons can be learned going forward. So first and foremost, he is reacting to this as the president, trying to get some of those answers here in the coming hours, Whit.
Yeah, as you noted earlier, president first, candidate second, and everything is being recalibrated now. This is a pool video right now that we're also getting. This was President Biden, his motorcade pulling up to the White House. Remember, he was in Delaware earlier. He cut his weekend trip short to come back to help handle this crisis and respond to it. So the president flew from Delaware, he flew into Andrews and then picked up the motorcade, and then we saw the Beast and the other vehicles then taking him to the White House, and that is the video of the president's arrival. We also know, Mary Bruce, thank you. I want to go to New Jersey because we also have video of former President Trump, who flew into Newark earlier today. Then his motorcade picked him up there and took him to Bedminster. And joining us now on the phone is our investigative reporter John Santucci, who's been following along. And John, we're getting more response now from Trump's family and the Trump campaign and a video that they're sending out.
Yeah, this is a video that one of the aides that was traveling with Donald Trump back from New Jersey just posted. I know our control room is working to turn that around very quickly, so we'll bring that to our viewers as soon as we can. But again, think this is all just remarkable. You know, as we've been reporting for the last several hours, as you've been leading our coverage with, you know, the Trump team has really been learning everything in real time. I can tell you that I have been speaking to members.
John, forgive me, I'm interrupting you just for a moment here because I just want to make clear to our viewers what they're seeing right now. This is video, the first video that we have seen of former President Donald Trump since the shooting earlier today. This was released by a campaign official. This is him stepping off of the plane that he flew into Newark, New Jersey. Remember, Trump was swept off the stage by the Secret Service. He waves to the camera there. He was taken to the emergency vehicles, taken off to a hospital for treatment, and was told that he suffered a graze wound to his right ear. And these are the very first images that we're seeing of the former president walking down the steps off that plane since the shooting, the assassination attempt. John, sorry again to interrupt. I just wanted to point out what the viewers were seeing. But again, you have been in touch with the Trump family throughout the course of the day.
Yeah, and with that image, I can tell you something that, you know, at the end of the day, look, Donald Trump, we all know, right, is larger than life, if you will. But for his children, he is dad. And, you know, I can tell you that none of the children were with him today in Pennsylvania. They were all scrambling to reach their father, to get an update. They were actively in touch with Secret Service. I spoke to his two eldest sons, Donald Trump Jr. and Eric Trump. They both were able to reach their father. Donald Trump Jr. telling me that when they spoke, his father was in good spirits, commented about how much blood was coming down his face moments after that happened. But again, as both boys observed to me with, you know, their father is resilient. And I think to see Donald Trump, as we're showing our viewers on screen right now, you know, to think hours earlier, that image that we have played over and over again of Donald Trump, you know, with agents swarming him and pulling him into that motorcade. I can tell you from many aides and sources of mine that I have built in 10 years of covering Donald Trump for ABC News, many were horrified, several of whom I've known for quite some time, answered the phone when I was trying to find out what was going on, in tears, crying themselves because of how special a relationship they have with Donald Trump. These people have worked for him for a decade, some even longer than that, sources of mine within the Trump Organization, the president's company, trying to learn what was happening in real time. Now, look, as far as what we know with for tonight, our expectation, you mentioned to our viewers, that Donald Trump right now is in that motorcade, leaving Newark, heading back to his club in Bedminster, New Jersey. We're expecting to spend the evening. Tomorrow is supposed to be, or was supposed to be, I think that's a more appropriate word, a quiet day ahead of the Republican National Convention. But you got to imagine with Donald Trump, he is going to want to get out there and say something to his supporters, given these images of him walking off his plane for the first time anybody's seen him since he was escorted very quickly out of that rally in Pennsylvania. The other thing that we should note with for our viewers is that, you know, this has been a very busy time for Donald Trump, where he has really been focused on the campaign. We reported, as you know, with in just the last 24 hours, he was doing private meetings with the three finalists, if you will, potentially be his running mate. And he thought that this rally today in Pennsylvania was going to be that big event. That ended up not being the event because of the coverage. Obviously, we've been talking about something nobody could have predicted. But our understanding is that Donald Trump is still full steam ahead with the convention, expected to head to Milwaukee on Monday. And we still believe that is then and there we'll find out who his running mate is. It is, though, I have to tell you, just as an observer, someone who's covered him for this time, I'm surprised that, you know, the fact that they are moving so aggressively ahead with the campaign, but then again, not. You know, we know that Donald Trump has had so many twists and turns over the last year, and so often they collide with the campaign, and Donald Trump finds a way, if you will, to make it all work. And I think that's exactly what's going to happen now.
Absolutely, John, and you're seeing this remarkable split screen right here. John, thank you again. On the left side of your screen, that is that image that we discussed, the first images that we've seen of the former president after the shooting, stepping off the plane and then heading to Bedminster, New Jersey. On the right, those were the earlier images of the motorcade after he flew into Newark, then escorting him to Bedminster. And joining us now, I believe on the phone, is Rachel Bate, our political contributor. Rachel, we've had many conversations in recent weeks about the state of the campaign. And once again, another unprecedented moment in this campaign, an attempted assassination of a former president. What are you learning from your sources tonight?
Yeah, hey there, Whit. I mean, we can certainly say right now that this is going to further scramble a presidential campaign that is already roiling in chaos, as you just said. I mean, it is very much electrifying Republicans who are already rallying around Donald Trump, and from Democrats who already have heartburn about this campaign, they're even more worried about dimming prospects of taking back the White House. I mean, my colleagues and I were hearing just hours after this assassination attempt from Republicans who are saying, look, we think this is going to solidify Trump's chance of winning back the White House. One congressman here in Wisconsin, where I am right now, Derek Van Oren, said that President Trump survives this attack. He just won the election. We also heard from other Republicans who were talking about that sort of iconic picture of Trump pumping his fist in the air, showing that he sort of survived this, saying this is going to be an image that Republicans are going to rally around. And I think, you know, we're also starting to see some conspiracy theories, unfounded conspiracy theories circulate on the Republican side of things, particularly from some more Trump-aligned MAGA wing officials. I mean, there was a Congressman, Mike Collins, who's tweeting things that Joe Biden sent the orders. To be clear, there has been no evidence of that. And in fact, a lot of people would say this is very dangerous to say this sort of thing right now. But these are the kinds of comments we're actually hearing from Republicans right now. And it's particularly interesting because you have a lot of folks out there saying this should be a moment to take stock in where we are as a country and how heated the political rhetoric has gotten, and that this should be a chance to sort of take down the temperature of that conversation. I mean, independent candidate Robert F. Kennedy Jr. was on television today saying, you know, President Biden should invite Trump to jointly address the nation and make a commitment to bringing down the temperatures. Instead, what we're seeing is potentially some Republicans actually leaning into this to rev things up even more.
It will be something to watch play out in the coming days, and a major moment of reflection for this country and who we are as Americans, and what this political campaign, this presidential campaign, is going to do and mean going forward. And on that note, let's bring back Mark Updegrove, a presidential historian who's been with us on this. Mark, again, as we've been getting your perspective and comparing this to other moments that we've seen in history, this just within about 6-7 hours of that assassination attempt of former President Trump, we see that image of him coming down the stairs of his airplane, landing in New Jersey, preparing to go right back to work on the campaign trail and the convention in less than 48 hours.
That's remarkable, and it does show Donald Trump's resilience. Donald Trump always seems to get back up somehow, and that image of him getting off Air Force One, seemingly going back to the campaign trail, but also the image I think that will most endure from this day is the image that I believe Rachel referred to earlier of Donald Trump pumping his fist in defiance, blood streaming down his face from the gunshot wounds to his ear. I think that the flag waving above him, I think that is the image that Republicans will likely rally around. It's very much in keeping with the Trump brand of defiance. So it's more or less that iconic, what will certainly become an iconic image, is on brand for Donald Trump with.
Mark, thank you again. Let's go back to Aaron Katersky, because I just want to make sure that we're following up some of this latest information that we're getting about the shooting. Aaron, we had that press conference moments ago. Officials are not identifying the shooter just yet, but you've been getting more information about how that process is moving forward.
It's taking a little bit longer than usual because we're told the shooter was not carrying any identification on him. So they've had to use DNA and try to use biometrics to confirm the identity of the young man that they believe fired off 8 rounds from an AR-15 style rifle perched on a rooftop some 200 to 300 yards away. We're still working for an exact location and distance, whether he was specifically perched or whether this was more a haphazard scattershot type shooting. But the authorities are saying tonight they're confident that there is no additional threat. Now, we also heard Pennsylvania State Police say they were concerned for a time about other people getting hurt, but they did not reveal why they had that concern. And we know tonight that law enforcement activity is taking place at locations in western Pennsylvania that may be associated with the shooter, and we'll see the results of those perhaps in the morning once the authorities tell us a little bit more. But the urgent priority is to confirm that he was acting alone, that there is no additional threat, and then the questions about motive, how he was able to pull it off,